Hi guys, and welcome back to Class A People, where we've got Ryan in recovery, aka Ryan Phillips, all the way from TikTok and all the way from Margate, and he is now in the sticks of the countryside. How are you finding it?
I love it. Very rural and remote.
I couldn't quite believe that I lived here, I don't think. But anyway, Ryan has a TikTok page called Ryan in Recovery. I feel like a lot of people have been waiting for this episode.
Yeah.
We've had a few requests for it, so here you go. And we're going to do what we always do, start with childhood. Mm-hmm. Very fun. We're going to work our way through your story. So, you were born, Ryan.
I was born on the International Day of Happiness, actually, which I don't think is a coincidence. First day of spring as well. A lot of positives. My dad was in the film industry. My mum was just a stay-at-home mum. Had a nice upbringing. We used to have big parties all the time, which I later found out were very cocaine-fueled parties. And all the kids would kind of just play upstairs. But yeah, so I was always kind of having parties and all that sort of stuff. This was back when my dad's had a successful business and we had like a 5-bedroom house and I had the top floor of the house to myself.
Lovely.
I had like a little football pitch set up. It was quite, it was pretty exciting when you're like...
So you'd probably rather be up there than downstairs with adults, don't you?
Yeah. As I got a bit older, I'd sometimes come down and like minesweep the alcohol and stuff like that.
Oh, of course, naturally.
But yeah, it was fun. And then my dad, he used to grow marijuana in our conservatory.
So your mum's having cocaine parties without you knowing, and your dad's growing marijuana.
Yeah, and he used to actually, obviously he just had it in the conservatory, which I saw, but he told me there were tomato plants and the tomatoes grew under the soil. It wasn't until I got older and I could visualise the plant and was like, that's what you were doing. And obviously as I got older I didn't start to recognise the smell and stuff like that.
Did he smoke it then, I presume?
Every day until probably about 5 years ago he stopped.
Okay.
He thought he needed it to sleep, but actually when he went to the doctor they were like, it's the reason you're not sleeping is because you smoke too much weed. Mm. So he stopped.
And what was school like?
School was fine. I was like pretty middle of the road. Was like good at sport and stuff like that, which I think if you're good at sport at school, you kind of...
You're just naturally popular if you're good at sport.
I was never like the popular kid, but I was always kind of in that group and stuff like that. Mm. But I was kind of just a bit... I'd say I was a bit blending in the background really at school. I was quite shy. I am still quite shy, but I'm a bit more comfortable just talking now, whereas at school I would tend to just not really speak in class and stuff like that. I would try and just blend in as much as possible. I only really started to think about it later on, but I have this thing. I've since found out it's called a paracosm, but it's like an imaginary world in your own head. Okay. But it's really, really, really intricate and vivid. So like from I can't even remember when it started. It started from before my memories are fully formed. But basically I have this, and it's still there, but I don't think about it anymore. But as a kid, I would constantly daydream and go into these really almost like a hypnotic state, thinking about this alternative world. And in this alternative world, it was detailed. There were families that had birthdays and had haircuts and had jobs and lived on streets that had names. And I would remember it all. And I would remember when they needed haircuts. I remember when they were going to school and getting picked up from school. I've since found out it's like an actual thing. It's like a diagnosed thing.
What's that called again?
Paracosm.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so when I first told it to my therapist, she was like, okay, this is something we need to dig into. What's weird is because it's always been in my brain, I've never thought of it as anything unusual.
And you think probably everyone else has it.
But yeah, but also I never spoke about it, so I wonder if I maybe did. I'd never told anyone until I told my therapist. And then
how did you tell them that though? Did you say that you thought it was daydreaming? Because you also
we
were
kind of talking about feelings of being like overwhelmed in social settings and stuff like that. And did I have a tool for it when I was a little kid? And I said, when I was a little kid, I'd sometimes take myself away from situations and I'd just start fantasizing about these things. And because her whole thing was like maybe drugs replace that later on.
So did it eventually disappear?
What's weird is sometimes like when I would use, and that horrible like witching hour when you can't get to sleep and the drugs are gone.
The luge.
I would go to there to help me try and get to sleep, or just to try and take me out of the come down. Like almost put myself into like a meditative state. There was like a newspaper, bands, actors, football teams, everything that all had different names. It was almost just like there was like a version of David Beckham. There was like just a parallel universe that I lived in.
So you had like a Sims going on in your head.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Yeah. But just so detailed. But yeah, so every now and then it would just pop into my head, and I would just be like, almost like check in with.
Make sure everyone's okay in that world, yeah.
And I'd do it as an exercise to help me sleep, or an exercise to help me calm down if I feel anxious and stuff like that. And that is kind of escape from reality. I then likened to like what my using became, which was, by myself, closing the door, kind of hiding away sort of patterns.
Have you pinned it down to like the reason why, as a young boy, you were trying to escape from whatever was going on? With the things going on at home?
I just think I've always found some things overwhelming, but I don't know if I knew I found it overwhelming. Do you know what I mean? I just, in
sounds
hindsight,
like a coping mechanism that you've just done as a kid, like that fight or flight, or that survival mode that you go into, but you don't actually know you're doing it because you're only a child.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I've heard you say things like this before on your channel, like comparing your trauma or comparing situations like that. I would always look at myself and think everything's fine.
Yeah, same.
It's only really through therapy and through reflection and through more inward looking that I've started to be like, my trauma or my whatever is valid and actually it's worth thinking about. I've always just pushed it to the side because I've been like,
everything else is worse.
Yeah. I've always looked at my own situation and just thought, normalised it or minimised it or whatever. And I think, actually, my mum and dad my mum is from foster care, had some really dark situations happen to her when she was young, and she told me about a lot of these things when I was young, and was a heavy drinker and would kind of have this weird relationship with me. She'd get really drunk and make me sit with her.
Yeah.
And I think
you kind of, it's that like you basically you play an adult role as a child.
Yeah. Which I think, I don't know about you, but when I was a child, I almost took pride in it.
Loved it.
I was like, I'm so much more mature than my age, or I'm like,
but also that time that you get to spend with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing as well, because you feel like you're almost seeing behind the curtain of being an adult as a child, which is thrilling when you're a child.
Yeah.
But actually, when you reflect on it, there's a reason why that isn't really normal. But what's also when I got older, that's then the role I almost wouldn't say looked after my parents, but like my parents split up. My dad then was clinically depressed on medication, and I would like spend all my time worrying about them and looking after them, or like lending my mum money and stuff like this. And it's like the role becomes skewed because suddenly from like not that old, like 16, 15, I'm now like feeling like I'm the protector of my parents.
Are you an only child?
No, I've got a younger sister.
So how old were you when they split up?
Yeah, around that age, 14, 15.
That's quite a hard age. I'm not saying that it's ever easy.
The thing is, it's a formative age, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like when you're going through stuff yourself, discovering yourself, starting to make that transition from from childhood to adulthood. And I think it's when your brain's almost a bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that I think when a trauma can happen then, it can leave maybe a bigger imprint than if it happens later on in life and stuff like that.
Or was it a dramatic divorce?
The problem is that they sat down and told me and my sister, but then it didn't properly happen for like 2 years. And in that time, it was a very unhappy household. It was like my dad lived, because we had quite a big house at the time, we had a staircase that went up to two sides, and my dad lived on one side, my mum lived on one side, and just did not like being in the same room together, which when you live in that atmosphere has an effect.
Definitely. And I think you're trying to appease both without upsetting both.
Well, even for me, it's like me and my dad would go for long walks, walking my dog, and my dad would talk to me about my mum in kind of disparaging ways, which I again think that's pretty messed up. It was kind of unspoken that when they split up I was going to move with my mum, and I ended up saying I wanted to live with my dad, and I think it was because of them sorts of conversations I started to get a bit brainwashed by it, and had a bit, and my mum was kind of the one leaving. She was the one pushing for the breakup.
Why were they breaking up?
Well, my dad's business had started to fail, and the problem with my dad is he kind of hid it a bit. He didn't accept that the business was failing for a while, and he started to take family money, put it into the business to keep it afloat. And so it meant that when it sunk, when it tipped, it then tipped quickly. And
it was quite a shock for her.
Yeah, she had to sell the car. And like, don't get me wrong, I love my mum, but she loves her nice things, her shiny objects.
Yeah, well, she'd become accustomed to it.
Yeah, and I think that caused a riff. And also, I have a cousin. I've got a tattoo on my arm, 512, which is I was born 3 months apart from my cousin. He had cystic fibrosis. He died a couple of years before that, which obviously caused a big split in the fact. Like it was just heavy on the family because we were very close. Like me and James, his name was. We spent every opportunity together. Every weekend we'd be together. Every holiday, summer holidays.
Kind of like brothers, really.
Yeah. So but also my mum and his mum, my dad's sister, were best friends.
So when they split.
There was all this fracturing happening. It just put me in impossible situations. I was like, I don't know what to say because I don't have an opinion on it. But yet you're just using me as kind of a soundboard. Really. Yeah, my mum. It got to a point. I mean, there's a lot with my mum, but it got to a point where she's got this pattern where she gets wine, gets a box of fags, will like sit on a table like this, and then just like find people to phone and talk, because she'd be by herself. And I was one of those people. I'm talking about after I moved out and lived in London or whatever. She'd ring me, have these like heavy conversations, or I wonder if I should never have left your dad. I feel sad about James dying, losing the family dynamic. But then we'd do it the day after and would say the same stuff and couldn't remember, because obviously she's been really drunk. And I, in the end, had to be like, you're no longer allowed to call me when you have a drink. You're not allowed. But then she'd be like, I don't feel heard. I want to like blah, blah, blah. And like put all this kind of pressure on me. And I was like, Mum, first of all, I can't keep reliving them same things over and over. Like, those traumatic things from my childhood. And two, nothing's actually gained from these conversations, because you're drunk, you don't remember them. It's not like we're having this therapeutic moment. Nothing's being cleansed. You're just ranting because you've had a drink. Yeah. And I'm just a soundboard. And it's ultimately damaging for me, because I'm...
Yeah. But also, you're dealing with that every day, whereas she thinks she's reliving it for the first time each time you're having the conversation.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating part of it. Yeah. But then when I started to be like, no, and I'd get annoyed. She'd ring me and I'd be like, you've had a drink? She'd be like, no, I hadn't. And I can just tell by the tone of my mum's voice if she's had a drink or not. So I'd be like, you have. And then she would lie about having had a drink. And then I'd hear the clink of the glass or whatever, and I'd be like, Mum, I can hear you refilling your glass. It's like, come on. And there's elements of that still happens a bit now. And I guess I just had to accept that's a reality of our relationship. But I have to set a boundary now and be really clear with it. And she has to respect it.
Quite difficult if she forgets.
Yeah. Well, I set the boundary when she's sober. And hopefully she remembers when she's not. And also, it's not worth forgetting that there were a lot of times when both of us were drunk.
So when that sort of situation was going on, where Dad was going up to the left, Mum was going off to the right, you and your sister, did you become quite close in that situation?
Me and my sister have always been close. We had a typical brother-sister relationship where we would fight a lot.
What's the age gap?
She's 2 years younger. But what's nice is that we've got older, and we're really, like, she was really the first person to kind of be there when this all came out. And I would always imagine telling, because for years I was like, I just want to get a hold of this. And I would almost play through scenarios in my head of how I would tell people, and it would almost always be my sister that I would be imagining telling, because that's the one person where I was like, maybe she understands my brain.
You then go to live with your dad?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I later found out he was... Well, I didn't actually later find out. I found the medication, I Googled it, and it was antidepressants. And he was... Because you think about it, my cousin died, he was close to, his business failed, my mum left him, all within a few years. So it's like...
How old are you, when your cousin died?
12, and then my parents split up like 14.
12's a hard age to lose.
I was like, there when he died and all this stuff. It was like heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Really heavy. And, but yeah, I went to live with my dad. And the problem with that was that my dad wasn't the parent that raised me, really. So when my dad then... I was still in secondary school, bear in mind, like the end of secondary school. I would just not go and he wouldn't notice. He would just go to work. And then I'd just sit at home smoking cigarettes and like playing computer games or whatever. And then come home and he'd be like, how's school? I'd be like, yeah, fine. And that was it. And he didn't even notice. Like the school would ring and I'd delete the messages off the phone and stuff like that. Like I would just bunk off all the time. So then it meant that my last 2 years of school...
Was your sister living with your mum?
Yeah.
That's quite hard that they just split you guys up. But...
Well, I then chose, because my whole thing is then when I started to imagine my dad being by himself and like...
Again, worrying about
in my
them.
mind, it was like the fair thing is that they get one each kind of thing. That was the logic in my brain. Yeah. But also, my dad then started dating this woman and was staying at hers all the time. So I just have it all my mates around mind, like smoking weed and stuff. And doing...
Okay, so that's where we start.
There's a funny story when we were all smoking weed in my lounge, and my dad had been at his new girlfriend's house, and he came home unannounced. And
I hate it when they do that to their own house.
And bear in mind, it was like a hot box in the lounge. Like we're all just smoking weed. Like I can't remember playing FIFA or whatever. And he kicked everyone out. But one of my friends, I'm still friends with now, he was so stoned that as he went to leave the house, he tripped up and he fell into this giant hedge that I've got next to the front door of my dad still lives in the same house. Yeah. And he couldn't get out of the hedge, so we wanted to like pull him out of the hedge, but while my dad was trying to be really angry, but like finding it hilarious, he's all covered in leaves and whatever.
But how does like your dad parent that when he's growing weed in the house and smokes weed? Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, that's the thing,
and did you use that against him?
No, not really.
But was he even that angry?
He was just like, everyone get out.
So you're there, then you go back to mum's.
Yeah, so went back in with my mum, and she likes the good life.
Did she grow up with money?
No, she was in foster care. It's actually a mad story. Her parents, one day her mum just walked out when she was like 4, And about, I don't know the exact timeline, but say like 2 weeks later, Dad was like, I'm going to go and look for Mum, and he just didn't come back either. And then the neighbours noticed that there was no parent in the house.
Wow.
Like, she had older brothers, and then they got put into foster care, they all got split up, and then she got put into foster care and basically was abused by the family she got put with. Yeah. So then she ended up running away, coming to London.
Happens quite a lot, that.
Yeah.
So Mum has, see this, but the reason why I do like talking about childhood, right, is because a lot of us, now that we're adults, we don't think that things have affected us, but, and it's not, this is a podcast, I've never to blame our parents, but it's like, there just have been, the thing I'm passionate about is this generational trauma, right?
I had a really amazing therapist when I was in rehab. Yeah. And I had this one session where I couldn't stop crying, and I was like, you know, when you're like shaking, guttural crying, like that sort of crying, and it was all over all this stuff, and it was like, it just felt like this. It felt like she'd like opened me up. I felt so
you
weird. You
probably got into your inner child,
yeah,
and you were right there with it.
But she had this style of therapy where I find a lot of therapy I just talk and they just nod. Whereas she would like stop me and say something or pick at something, and then it would just be like boom. I'd come away from it feeling amazing, but also like a shivering, like quivering mess, really. But what was a real big eye opener for me in therapy, and I think it's a really thing of note worth mentioning, is like, yeah, people look at James dying and say, oh, that's this big trauma, or look at my parents splitting up and say, that's a big trauma. But for me, it's not necessarily them things. It's the 1,000 tiny things.
Yeah.
It's your mum maybe having a weird conversation, maybe she had a drink, or someone not giving you the certain love you needed at a certain moment. It's like a million different small things. It's not always these big obvious traumas. Yeah. And that's what I've really had a breakthrough with therapy, is that. Because, and like we were saying before, is I would always minimise them things and dismiss them things, when actually I think a lot of the reasons I have some not so healthy behavioural patterns as an adult is because of that stuff. And it's like, and I think it's really important for people not to ignore that stuff. One of the big things I've struggled with the whole, like, I guess, revealing my addiction is that, how can I explain it? It's like I don't have that feeling anymore of being like the one that people come to, or like the kind of all-knowing, or like I can dish advice out and my life's sus and I can pass on the wisdom kind of thing. I'm almost now on the back foot, where it's like, and I always feel sometimes I'm around people and they kind of give me that almost like sympathetic look a little bit, I guess, and it really makes me annoyed. Even though it's coming from a good place, I just still struggle. I think my ego gets in the way and I can't accept that I'm now not
the go-to person, because they see you as a bit more fragile.
But I also think that that's all part of it, isn't it? I think the whole ego thing and the whole using it like feeds that need to be at the top of the tree, when actually I need to go backwards.
The day I picked my sponsor was because of these words that came out of her mouth, and that was, every addict, or the majority, most addicts, will have something called a huge ego, low self-esteem, and it stuck with me forever.
I've definitely got
so
that.
True, because you're the life and soul usually, but you are the most insecure person. I would always have this thing, it's an ADHD thing as well, I'd have a relatable story, and maybe sometimes that would be fabricated to, you know, it wasn't like a trauma competition thing, but it was like, it's okay, I'm here and I'm listening, and if I tell you that something similar happened to me, you'll maybe feel like more comfortable having the conversation.
I've definitely done stuff like that, for sure.
And it's interesting, like, now I look back on things like that, and I figured out that it's because I was so wanted that level of connection.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I find interesting, I think you might be the same, is that I never struggled to have deep, meaningful conversations outside of a sesh.
Towards the end, it was almost the opposite for me. I've always been someone that can talk about emotional stuff. I can speak on it all day, but it's whether I'm actually feeling it. There's almost like a disassociation going on. Because there's times where I've been in sharing circles and I've spoken, suddenly been like, and wanted to cry, and be like, fuck, where did that come from? Because it's like I've probably not actually felt it, and there's also an element of it. It's probably like a rehearsed way of talking. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Or like, especially if you don't think you don't even know what your trauma is, right? And especially in group work, something, especially for me in the early days of recovery, someone were doing a main share, and the memories suddenly that started coming back for me. There was a guy doing a share about he was talking about drink driving, and all of a sudden I remembered this awful scenario. I told it on a video before, but I essentially I was going out with this DJ, and I wanted to be at his afters and I was at a different one. So I drove there, and I drove the wrong way down a slip road onto a motorway, onto two oncoming lorries who were beeping at me. I was high and drunk. I U-turned in the motorway and got back up the slip road. And I genuinely that my brain had completely taken that part out, and I was just thinking of what happened at the afters because there had been a drama there, and it just came back to me. And that's the power of someone else.
Yeah, it triggers something.
Yeah, and it's like, but then in my head, I'm like, what else have I done? What else have I forgotten about?
Probably a lot of things.
Yeah.
Probably buried, but maybe for good reason.
Okay, so you didn't really go to school. Did you get any exams? Did you get your GCSEs or A levels?
I got my GCSEs, but bear in mind I'd moved back in with my mum at this time. The stockbroker also then moved in, massive cokehead, but there's more to that. So maybe further down the line. He got me a summer job at the stockbrokers.
Yeah.
The plan was just to kind of like push paper, make coffee, be like the kind of the office admin man, and also answer the phones. Because every team would have like a desk of tables just with like a communal. They had their own phones, but then also a main phone. So I would answer the main phone and divert it to whatever stockbroker. But one of the directors was always like, "You're really good on the phone. You talk really well. You should consider being a stockbroker." And I was like, "No." And he was like, "You can earn like $3,000 a week." Bear in mind, this time I'm like 16, 17, so I was like,
No. Yes,
I'll have a piece of that.
Yeah.
So I stayed. So they ended up sacking off any thoughts of further education and getting a job there. When I turned 18, took my trading exams, became a stockbroker. But it was like Wolf of Wall Street style stockbroking, not like investment bank, like high up stuff. It was like calling old people in the countryside and rinsing them of their savings, basically, to sell dodgy stock. But it was like, bear in mind, I'd just come out of school, and it was like very, very cokey. Like people would be doing coke on desks. One of the first lunches I went on, we'd go on these Friday boozy lunches that you wouldn't go back in the office. Bear in mind, at this point, I hadn't done cocaine.
Right.
One of the brokers grabs another broker's head, licks the side of his head, gets the wrap of coke out, rubs it onto his face, and then just sniffs it off the side of his face. At 4 p.m. on a Friday. And I'm just like...
And you're 18 watching
Not even 18, I don't think. Maybe 17. But yeah, around that age. And I was late to cocaine. I didn't...
Surely if the face is wet, you're not going to get that.
Well, bear in mind, he just wasted most of the coke.
That's a complete waste.
He didn't care at that.
Traumatic.
Yeah, he was probably earning $20,000 a month, so he didn't give a shit. It was more just to make everyone else laugh. But bear in mind, all these guys would be constantly trying to get me coke, which I think now, thinking back, now that I'm the age I'm at, I'm at a similar age to probably what they were then, I would never try and push cocaine on a teenager. No. Ever. I would do the opposite.
But they're living that life, right? And when you're living that life...
They would talk about how they have flats for prostitutes, all this kind of stuff. It was just like very... Exactly what was portrayed in Wolf of Wall Street. It's like just a seedy, alpha male, toxic environment. Like there was 2 women that worked there, the receptionists, that everyone was just trying to shag or talking about shagging or whatever. It was just that kind of atmosphere. And I've never really been comfortable in them alpha male situations. So I found it like a bit of an eye-opener, and I had to kind of adjust really quickly.
Did you not feel peer pressured in that situation? Like I
eventually started getting...
yes. If I was in that situation, I know that I was... Yeah.
I found being around coke a bit scary.
For sure. I was terrified of it. I mean, I didn't do first line since I was 20. Okay, come on. There must be another story. I'm fascinated by that world.
Well, what was a bit messed up is the guy that my mum then got with, the broker that got me the job, turned out was a scumbag. Yeah. But he started giving me coke at home all the time. We'd just be watching TV, and he'd come in and be like, "There's a line under the flannel in the bathroom," and I'd be like,
"Oh my god, that whole line."
But like, we weren't sitting drinking or anything. It was just like watching Grand Designs on a Wednesday, and we're gonna like bosh a few lines. I was like, I don't understand this, but fine. I was like, okay, cool, and I just started doing it.
That's your introduction to it.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, the first introduction is I actually took my first pill before I tried coke.
Okay.
I've been out on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
The Connaught rooms in Holborn, I think it's called. Took half a pinger, got stuck in a lift broke, and I came up for my first ever drug in a broken lift, and was like, in the lift, like absolutely having it off in the lift. I remember coming out of the lift and me and like with sardines in the lift.
Oh.
But Scissor Sisters came on, which I don't even like, and I like knee slided onto the dance floor and was like, whoa! Okay, and then I was staying at my mum's at this time, and I got back, and they were having a party, classic. And the broker, looked in my eyes and was like, "You're having a good time tonight, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Come upstairs with me." So I came upstairs, and then he just racked up a line. And for some reason, I just didn't say, "Oh, I've never had it before." I was just like, "Okay," and just did it. And that was my first line. But then after that, I was then like his little insider wingman to be coke with, kind of thing.
Did you like it straight away?
I couldn't really tell because I was so pinging off my face. Yeah, I was just like, but I just remember getting into bed and being like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." I mean, I myself thought it was amazing at the time, which you do when you're that young and discovering all that stuff. But again, it's a bit like what we were talking about in a different way. It's like the thrill of seeing people behind the curtain a bit and being like, because I kind of then was like, well, I'm a man now. I'm in this manly environment. I'm earning money.
When you start taking coke, it really opens your world up to how many people take coke.
Especially in the circles I was in Canary Wharf and places like that, it's just everywhere. And also, I think there's something to be said for like at that age, seeing how normal it is to everyone.
Yeah.
How normalised.
But like also adults, like when we were first starting doing coke, like I was classed as an adult, even though I was 20, like I classed an adult as being my parents' age. And then
I don't feel like kind of an adult.
Neither do I.
To be honest. I'm still waiting for the time when it's going to happen.
It's coming soon. I would see like, people, my parents' age, and I'd be like, or people like in the workplace who are a manager, and you're like, this is so normal.
Because I think as well, it's playing some subconscious thing on you, isn't it? Where it's like, that person's, I could aspire to be like that person. They've got a good job, they're cool, they've got a nice house, but they take drugs. So it's something in your brain, I guess it's saying...
It also makes it normal.
Taking drugs is fine. You're not going to go down and out if you take drugs.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's all part of that aspirational things.
Yeah.
Includes taking drugs.
Yeah.
I've never really consciously felt that, but something probably goes on in your brain.
Definitely. So, how long are you doing the stockbroker sort of situation for?
A few years.
But can we just delve into this whole like dynamic of your mum's partner?
Well, then, so he ended up actually having an affair with someone at work that I also worked at, which I then found out about, obviously, and then they split up.
Did you tell your mum?
No, as I found out, it all came out. But
are you two from that day on then? It's become normal for you two to do coke together?
Yeah, very normal.
The part I'm interested in is that sometimes, or was it the majority of the time, you weren't pissed?
Yeah, like I say, sometimes it's just, I think he would maybe come home after he'd been at the pub and I'd just be indoors and he wanted to carry on.
Did you not find taking coke really anxiety making?
Yes.
Yeah,
But I don't know why, I just didn't say no. I'd probably then start drinking a bit. I've got to quickly down half bottle of wine.
That's what I did every time. Yeah. The 2 times that I'd done it without.
Because I would always have a rule early on with coke taking where I was like, I have to be a certain level of drunk before, otherwise it gets too edgy.
Yeah, I was like that.
Yeah.
It's funny how that quickly wears off.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you don't even need to have a sip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But around that time as well, I was also in bands playing gigs in London. And I left that company when it worked for another investment bank.
Same type of atmosphere?
No, it was a bit. They're more of a bigger bank. There was still coke, like parties and doing coke, but not like in the office and stuff like that. But still that kind of lifestyle. But then the Lehman Brothers, which is a massive investment bank, that crashed and it caused a massive crash, and I got made redundant. And so then I just started putting on gigs with my band and bands that we'd met, that we played with, on lineups and stuff like that. And I did one at, do you remember Proud in Camden, the club?
No.
There was a club called Proud Galleries in Camden. It was very much like the Amy Winehouse, Pete Doherty kind of era. I started doing nights there and I would make like $2-3 grand in cash.
Yeah. So
that was when I was like, wait a minute, I don't need to go back to the city, I can just do this instead. Mm-hmm. And I just started doing that. And then got my own place. My place became an absolute den for the sessions.
So at this point, do you think it's a problem?
I definitely noticed from really early on that I liked it a lot more than everyone else.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like the Pied Piper because I had money.
Yeah.
And my friends didn't really.
Yeah.
Like, most of my friends were still at uni or starting out in their careers on low paid jobs. I was like making good money. I started putting on a night at a club called 333 in Shoreditch. Yeah. And that's when I then started getting into more the DJ side of it and started getting more into electronic music. And I became their resident DJ and would do 8 hours every Thursday, Friday and Saturday. 24 hours of DJing every week.
Is this a sellotape to the MCAT soon?
Yeah.
You're going to have to tell people.
Yeah, so I used to buy... Also, I want to clear this up because it seems to be a big trigger for people in the video. One of my friends started selling it to me. Yeah. It's called Candy. It's a mix of Coke and Mandy. And I was like, yeah, cool. Being like, how have you mixed 2 things that cost like £46 a gram and charged £20? But, I wasn't questioning it. It made me high. I was enjoying it. Yeah. Then I found out, obviously, as it then got more popular, that it was actually plant food, and you could go on plantfood.com and order it to your house. Yeah. So I started doing that and ordering like big quantities, and I would take them with me to DJ. But the problem was when I first started doing that, because I'd have like 10 gram bags of it, I'd go home and just sit up all weekend doing it. So then I'd end up like doing these free DJ sets on no sleep, and be just like a shell for a week afterwards. So then what I started to do to try and get a hold of it is I would tape it under the shelf, right at the back, and I'd sellotape it, and then come back the week after and take it down and carry on doing it.
Would you not obsess over it once you got home, thinking, "Oh,
yeah, but because I knew the club was, I'd always be like, "Fuck," but then fall asleep, wake up, and be like, "Oh, I'm glad." That kind of thing. I'm the kind of person when I know I can't get to it, it's kind of out of my mind.
Yeah.
There was one time where I went all the way back.
Did you? I was going to say, because the amount of times we're lying there and then I get the text and I think, yeah.
Yeah, I did that a couple of times, but it did definitely keep living it a little bit. At the time as well, I then moved in with this girl, and she was like very wholesome. She worked in musical theatre and all this kind of stuff, and she didn't even know what drugs were. Like, I came home one day and I had like white, like, I don't know if you remember methadone being really sticky. Did you take?
No, I didn't do MCAT.
You're lucky. It was disgusting.
I've heard bad things though.
But it was like had this sticky residue, and I remember getting the night bus home from DJing, and just like boshing a load on the bus.
Obviously.
Being a gremlin, and then walking into the flat. She was like, "You got white stuff all like on your face here," and I was like, "Oh, I smoked a cigarette and the smoke dried on my face." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And that was it. Just like
delusional.
Yeah, but like, yeah, but to be honest, the MCAT period was very short.
Yeah, well, they shut it down, didn't they?
Yeah, as soon as it got made illegal and it was $40 a gram, I was like, I'd rather do coke.
So, yeah.
Would do loads of coke around that time, but yeah, I definitely had this thing where I had money and I had a flat.
So in your head, you're like, I'm fine.
Yeah, but also it meant that I was almost like the centre of it. So my friends would come to mine. I would probably end up paying for it a lot of the time, all that kind of stuff. But I started putting on then like electronic music nights. I had a dubstep night called I See Dub People. I had like all these like gimmicky kind of nights. But a couple of them did really well and got a big reputation in London, and you'd get people queuing around the block and stuff like that. And that's when I think it went on the radar of like the more established people that had like owners of XOY and Phonox and started contacting me and would like, "Do you want to come and do your night here, or we'll pay you a salary to run all of our nights, and then you just bring you'll bring your brand to us," kind of thing. So that's how I then went into working in the music industry proper. And then worked for a company called the Colombo Group, who owned Jazz Cafe, Blues Kitchen, XOY, Phonox, festival called Maiden Voyage.
God, I saw Eats Everything at XOY. I think
that's when I just started there.
Was it?
Yeah, I worked on them shows.
Yeah, Christ.
I actually went to an after party at Corsica Studios of Eats Everything, and he got kicked out for doing it.
He's fucking mental. Yeah. And he had some DJs really just, they don't hide it well.
All them Eats Everything, Scream, that crew are all, pretty openly party, and they're all fairly nice guys, but they don't know how to have a party.
Okay, so you're heavy now into this scene.
Yeah.
But you're probably feeling quite king of the castle, right?
You've got to understand that it's cool, isn't it, to work with famous DJs when you're that age?
And it's just DJ world, right? The DJ world is cool.
So it's like all that time when I'm partying and having those mad things, I'm now suddenly, I've got 25 people answering to me and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like you're becoming successful whilst living that life.
Yeah.
So there's no like drawback to it.
I'd probably have these inner dialogues of like, oh, this is maybe a bit problematic, but also I'm
doing
really well.
Yeah.
Everyone around me thinks I'm this success, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And I'll justify all the stuff like that. But the thing is, with that lifestyle, the rule generally was like, if I booked a DJ, say, to play XOY or Phonox, I would then. The way it happens, say you book a DJ that's really in demand, is you want to kind of make them have the best time ever, so that when the next play in London, they choose your club.
Yeah.
Because they make you loads of money ultimately. So my job would be to make sure they had the best time possible, which would normally mean loads of drugs, access to whatever they wanted, champagne, whatever. And I would be, if it was like a DJ coming over from the States or from Europe or whatever, a lot of the time they weren't with anyone, so I would just be their wingman.
So and
I would take them to dinner, do sound checks, spend the whole night with them in the DJ booth, racking them up lines, whatever. And then having afters with them, coming back to the hotel, like sometimes 2-day benders, whatever. So that whole work party line was really blurred for me, because it was like
rolled into one.
Yeah, it was all just and also because I was only in the clubs that I worked on at the weekends. The only time my friends could see me was to come to the clubs. I'd be like, I'll sort you out some drinks and drugs, just come. And
then I'm guessing you're then absolutely dying Monday to Thursday, and then you're back there Friday to Sunday.
I'd start to feel about normal Wednesday, and then I'd get the hunger again for the party by like Thursday, Friday.
I suppose you didn't really have a choice either, because that is your job.
Yeah. But it then also got to a point where I guess I was so like burnt out and tired that I was just taking drugs to like get through it. Like I'd buy like at the start I'd probably have coke, I don't know, the second half of the night or whatever. Whereas it got to a point where I'd buy coke before I even went to dinner. Yeah. So I was like, I just need that pick me up from the start.
Yeah.
And then obviously you're then doing it for like 10 hours like straight.
Were you doing other drugs?
I've taken everything you can take, but coke was the thing that I would always have. I'd never take pills or kit or anything like that when I was working, just because it's a bit too like mind-altering. But yeah, I've taken everything. I used to buy like medicinal kit and stuff like that and have it in my flat. It was just party. Like the other thing to say as well, and I don't know if this is safe to say on the podcast, but with nightclubs, obviously you confiscate drugs off people, and what tends to happen is the police will come and you give them the confiscated drugs, and every club has to hand over drugs, otherwise they're like, you're not doing the searches right. We would go through it and take out all the coke
what you wanted, yeah,
and just give them like the shit MCAT or Mandy or whatever.
It's the same at festivals.
Yeah, so so we'd end up having like these afters going through the confiscated and just like, and Phonox I know you've been to Phonox, it's got a basement that's got no light in it.
Yeah.
So we'd sometimes have afters and I'd realise it was like Sunday afternoon and I started on Friday.
But you didn't know.
And I'd get up and all the mums were like walking their bricks and
Oh, worst. Someone's on a run.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the worst. Is there any bad moments during this sort of period where you're...
I mean, like I said, when I first started taking coke, I knew I enjoyed it more than anyone else. I would always be mind blown if someone was like, had half a bag left and was like, I'm going to call it. I'd be like, there's still drugs left. What do you mean?
Absolutely.
Like, I just would have to go until it was gone.
Same.
No matter how long that took, I would keep going.
Would you do things like go to any lengths to get more?
Yeah, because what's mad is I would have like my really good coke, that guy that finished at like 11, then I'd have like the kind of Albanian guys that finish at like 5, and then I'd have another guy that started at 9. Mm-hmm. So like really, I could pretty much I could go the whole way through if I needed to. But it's that horrible thing when you're really twisted and paranoid, going out to get cash and like, oh, it's doing the drinks runs and all this kind of stuff. But I also I really started to get to a point where I couldn't switch off. So I would, if everyone wanted to call it, I would just carry on by myself.
Same.
And that's where, like, as in even like I would just like people would like be passing out in my flat and going to sleep, and I'd just be sitting on the table doing more and more.
Same.
And whatever.
And what were you doing in those times? Going on your phone?
Going on my phone, trying to find someone to talk to, just all nonsense. It makes me cringe deep within to think about it.
I would find as well though, you know, people. The difference for me as well was that if say people were starting to come down, but then I'd managed to get a number and someone had replied, that would give me enough of a rush to ignore the fact that I was coming down, but I knew that I could have more. Whereas other people, it would be like, oh, it's a 45-minute drive, or and I'd be like, well, I saw one of your videos when you said about having the secret gram. Yeah.
I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
I'd always be like, surprise! Thinking everyone would be overjoyed, and some people were like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's like 7 a.m.
Yeah.
I mean, that means we're now going till 3 p.m.
Yeah, I'd be like,
that's great.
I'd be like, can you be grateful, please?
Yeah.
You don't have to share it with you.
Or I'd do what you said, which is like go in and like do the hot plate thing and be like, no.
Yeah.
Like presenting like a Spanish chef or something.
And it would never trigger me to be like, right, that's the end of the night. It would be like, right, gotta get more.
It would make me chase it even more, if anything.
Same.
I'd even have like times where my nose basically stopped working, and I'd have little routines for how to try and make my nose work again, and all this kind of stuff. Albasoil, or if it was really like fast air, would clean my nose out. So I'd get the hairdryer and put it on like cool setting and just like blow it in my face.
I do things like go downstairs and have a hot shower and just blow my nose in the shower.
You know, like the steam and all that stuff. Yeah.
But
rather than just accept it's over.
Never. Because I knew what that brought.
Yeah.
And those come downs were just...
And I was like, I couldn't get away from the come downs. Like I had a period where I'd take Xanax and diazepam and stuff like that, but that messed with me up with me too much, so I stopped doing it. And I've never, it's the uppers are the things I have a compulsion with. I've never had a compulsion with downers. But yeah, the come downs would obviously get so grim to the point where even sometimes if I'd partied on a Friday, I had more night on through to the Saturday, I'd then go home, I'd reload and just go again by myself. And that's when it then started to become more of a like isolated thing. And then in COVID, I didn't work because obviously I ran venues were closed. But then I remember thinking, this is going to be a good chance for me to break this habit.
Yeah. So you knew that it was habit, problem, addiction, whatever we want to...
I mean, bear in mind, when I'd go home and do 2-3 grams by myself, I'm like, this isn't normal behaviour.
Yeah.
And also, I would be with people, also just the volume, because I'd quite often go and pick up for everyone, and I'd put 2 grams in my pocket.
Absolutely.
So I was like, I know that 2 grams that we're sharing ain't going to touch the sides for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas really, if I'd just done them 2 grams, I probably could have just had like a nice time, rather than being like, ugh, and all twisted because I've done so much.
Yeah. But also when you get to that stage of like, that heading into the 3-day, like you don't want to be around people who don't know what it's like to get to that stage.
Yeah.
You know, like because it does go from being that chatty fun thing to that fucking curtain twitching,
changing songs every 30 seconds.
Yeah, like doing the light, putting the light back on, looking at the sofa, looking at it, seeing something. It's like
this is when I was still smoking cigarettes. I'd run out of cigarettes, but be convinced there's still cigarettes in the flat, and I'd like turn my flat upside down, just look be like, there's a box here somewhere.
Yeah.
I've got a packet of tobacco here somewhere, whatever.
Yeah.
And just like sketchy behaviour like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd do things like barricade my front door because I was convinced someone was going to try and come in, shut every blind, turn all the lights down as much as they could.
We had the staircase, so we would go downstairs, lock the door, come back up, 2 minutes, literally 2 seconds over, did you lock the door?
Yeah, checking if the windows are locked, all that stuff.
Neighbourhood watch you turn into when actually it's
I had a hallucination that it was quite dark, and then this like blue neon ring just like formed in front of me, like in the air. It looked like something off of like Blue Planet, like the Abyss. And as I went to look at it, it kind of zoomed towards me and disappeared. And I was like, what the fuck was that? That really shook me. But then other times I've had ones where I remember looking out my window and my bike was chained up to the gate. I was in like a big block of flats. And a group of people came and stole my bike. And then the next day when I went and looked, my bike was still there and the chain was on and it was fine. So I was like, I must have just imagined that whole thing.
I've had that. This is really towards the end of my using, and I was sat outside. But I was outside and I was smoking, and I was lying on this bench and I was smoking, and I could hear people as if they were walking in a group coming up the lane. Sit up and look up, and I could see the head's shadows sort of outline walking towards me. I'm like, fucking hell, people are coming towards me. And then it would all shut off and let me know. And I'd have to like open and close my eyes loads of different times to see if they were there. But gradually, as each phase, I was seeing them and not seeing them, they were getting closer and closer and closer. And I couldn't work out what was reality and what wasn't.
Yeah, I've had a lot of stuff.
I had a lot of stuff of like, if I looked at the wall and it would be lots of the wall would be moving. But I think a lot of that is to do with sleep deprivation. Yeah. There's that classic thing of when you think you've got a bag, you think you haven't sniffed one bag. So
I did that every single time. Towards the end, for me, I started to like try and create these things to stop that. Like I'd put the bags out in line to be like, when I'm twisted, I need to be able to look and see that all the bags are there, because otherwise I'm going to spend an hour. That. I mean, yeah, there's lots of reasons why I gave up, but that it just had such a grip on me at the end that it became that it was never enough. I mean, it never was anyway, but towards the end I would do like a quarter in one session and it wasn't enough. To the point where I thought like I was going to die and it still wasn't enough. Like it was just like, it's mad. I
was always the person who needed to overorder, because in my head I was like, you guys are being stupid. Yeah, because like when you start, you're gonna wish that we'd ordered more, and people will be like, Hannah, we're not having that type of night. And I'm like, but it's always, you're being stupid. It always ends up that type of night. I was always the same.
It's like when we go to festivals and my friends will be like, I'm going to get like 3 grams. And I'm like, 3 grams for a 4-day festival. Like, you're going to end up regretting it.
But also, you're going to end up
like 10.
But also, you're going to end up asking me, and that's going to be annoying. Yeah, so just order the amount that I'm going to order.
I was always in that mindset, and I always just found it weird that other people weren't.
Yeah, but it's the fact that I didn't see it as like, that's just maybe because they just want to have a good time. I just saw it as you're being economically stupid. Yeah, because like you could get, if you buy more, it's probably going to be cheaper. But also, just be realistic with yourself. You're going to be up for 4 days, but they're not.
They're like,
I am.
I am the same. I couldn't. The thing for me is before COVID, even when I was using by myself, again, I'd become head of music. We just had like a record year at Clumber Group for making money. I was getting really well paid, bonuses, whatever. Was engaged to be married. Was saving to buy a house, all this kind of stuff, and was like, and everything. I definitely by this point, I would have these fantasies in my head of telling people of like how am I going to tell people, because I really then.
Did no one in your life think it was an issue?
I just think I was really, really, really good at hiding it. But then also you've got to bear in mind the kind of traumatic thing that happened to me. I'd gone from running 9 venues, 25 staff. I had to let all the staff go, make them all redundant on Zoom calls, which nearly gave me a nervous breakdown. And then a week after that. And I'd also said to my boss, is my job safe? A week after I made everyone redundant, he made me redundant. Totally fucked me. I was nowhere near as good at my job as I should have been, because I was tired, burnt out, high, whatever, all the time. So when that happened to me, even though I got totally shafted, I almost had this feeling of like, I think I deserved it. And I was questioned.
I did.
So it meant that I almost just kind of accepted it, but it put me in a hole in terms of my head. I was really in a bad place for a while after that. Because also what had happened is my whole identity was wrapped up in my work. I was this guy that ran nights and looked after DJs, and then when you took that away, I was like, what is it? What's left? Kind of thing. And then I started doing loads more coke, started spending money that I had saved to buy a house, and ended up burning through everything.
Just quickly on the relationship side of things, getting on it with them all the time.
The thing is, the reality is, I think you kid yourself, and I don't know if you had this as well. You kid yourself into thinking it's like you're bonding or having some nice time together, but you're not.
No.
If anything, you're doing the opposite.
Yeah.
Because then the next day you're like two shells and don't even want to touch each other.
Yeah.
And also, your sex life is fucked. All this kind of stuff.
People in relationships where you are solely both doing drugs together all the time.
Mm.
When that starts happening, that becomes your whole relationship. But with coke, for example, as we know, like it opens you up. So you think that, especially when you're first getting to know that person and you're having these massively deep and open conversations, you're like, this is my soulmate. We've connected on so many different levels. Yeah. So you kind of get convinced of the fact that you've got this deeper connection than you've ever had with anyone before. But it's the complete opposite. And the
issue I had as well is that my ex was really recreational. So we would call in like a bag, and I would have a bag or two on the side, and she'd often be like, oh, I'm ready to go to bed now, and I'd be like, I'm not. And I'd just carry on by myself, and she'd come in and be like, 4 hours later being like, why are you not coming to bed? Just because you're ready to go to bed doesn't mean that I'm ready to go to bed. That's exactly the conversations I have. Yeah.
There's no difference. You've just been sat here doing drugs with me, so there's no difference. But the difference is that I'm an addict and I can't.
I would have that sort of stuff all the time. I'd be like, why is it that I have to live by what you want to do?
That's what I say.
All this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it would just cause like proper rows.
But then in my situation, it would happen that then that role started to reverse. Not that I ever wanted to go to bed, but let's say if I maybe had work and I knew I needed to, if there was something major, very often I would just roll straight through. But if there was, and I'd say, I think you should stop now, all of a sudden that person then can use that against you too.
Yeah, that also happened with me. But it then just became this horrible thing, this like division. And then I started even using during the day in secret with her. And she'd be like, are you high? And I'd be like, no. What do you mean? And then just gaslighting basically. Became like that. It became really dark, and then I was like not getting out of bed until the afternoon. But then it was like, oh yeah, but I'm depressed because of what's happened with work, which was partly true, but it was also because I'd been up all night getting on it. And I was just like, I just became unhappy, really probably just like vacant in a relationship, all that kind of stuff.
That's what drugs do though, don't they?
Yeah, but we ended up then, when they announced second lockdown, I was like, I can't stay in this house anymore. So we went and rented like a little holiday place in Margate. And like anywhere, when you go to a new place, I was like, I don't even have a drug dealer's number. So it was like, at first I was like, great. And then I bumped into a guy I knew from the music industry on a walk and stupidly said, you don't have a number for around here, do you? And he was like, yeah, I do. And obviously that was then, the doors unlocked again in a new town. And very quickly I was back into the patterns.
What's the drinking situation like at this point?
Like I said, for me, the drink's never been a thing. Most of the time when I'd go and carry on by myself, I wouldn't drink. But it's almost like, for me, because I'd always be doing too much, like doing big lines and stuff like that, my throat would swell up a little bit or get really like dry. And then I'd like not want to drink alcohol. I'd not even want to drink water. I'd have to force myself to drink water to be like, oh, I've not had water in like 7 hours. I need to drink some water. But yeah, but then like now that I look back on the reality with my ex, it's like we weren't getting on at all at this point. It got to the point where our relationship was pretty fractured, and I just felt like because I was now doing this thing where I was hiding it and taking it during the day, I just went into this like shell by myself, and no one could really. And she'd always say like, "Where have you gone?" kind of thing, but again was like, and I was like, I'm not working, I don't have a purpose, I'm really struggling, which is true, but I was also had this whole secret using thing going on.
Do you remember the day where you kind of wake up and were like, yeah, that seems like a good idea?
I think it was probably from a roll through.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to get a bit more because I feel really shit and I need to feel a bit better. I started also doing things like I'm going to go for a run, and I'd run for like a kilometre and then just pick up drugs, walk around for half an hour and come back.
And but you're psychologically, you're telling yourself, I've had a good start to the day here.
I've earned it.
Yeah, I deserve it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm presuming that the engagement gets called off.
Yeah, so we had everything booked, like stately home in the northwest of Scotland. Obviously, I'm an event planner by trade, so I had like 150 people staying on the grounds. I had Optimo, famous DJs playing. Planned everything apart from the actual ceremony. I was just like, this is going to be the party of the century kind of thing. Obviously, not thinking lockdown would be as long as it was, cancelled it again.
Did it cross your mind, like, using drugs at your own wedding?
I probably would have, yeah.
Yeah.
So weddings are a coke session. If anyone says otherwise, they're in
I'm just fascinated because when I was with somebody and we did speak about marriage and the mutual friends that we'd had, every wedding we'd been to, I remember, even though I was off my tits, thinking, when I get married, I don't want that.
I mean, in my mind, I would like to think that I wouldn't, because I'd want to have that romantic evening in the hotel at the end of the night and stuff, which probably wouldn't happen in the same way I'd want it to if I was. Is that what you want on your wedding night?
No.
But there's also a reality that once I got a bit tipsy and I knew that all my friends had it, I was probably going to go looking for it.
Yeah.
But I never necessarily had the thought of like, oh, I'm going to do coke.
Do you think you cared more about who was going to be the DJ, where it was, what it was going to be like, because of the pressure that you have that as your job, than actually thinking about?
Well, in my mind, I was like, this is a chance for everyone to see what I do and how good I am at it.
So ego.
Because bear in mind, my family were always like, wait, you get paid to put parties on? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, they don't just happen accidentally. There's an infrastructure there, and I'm involved in that. And bear in mind, at this point, I'm then working on large scale things and booking big names, all this kind of stuff. But would still get a bit frustrated that my family were just like, oh, you put on parties. Can you get me guest list to Michael Bolton? And I'm like, no. And I just felt like no one really understood it. So I was a bit like, I'm going to do the production. I'd ordered this handmade sound system, like someone that built this wooden sound system, had a famous DJ playing. I kind
of felt like that with interior design. People were like, oh, so you just like decorate houses and plump up the cushions. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, with interior design, the 10% is the nice part. The 90% is organising architects, organising tradesmen.
Yeah. Well, that's what people don't realise. Someone overdosed and died at XY. They came running out the stairs and died on the street outside XY.
I looked up to someone at XOYO because I'd never done drugs at this point and went to XOYO. It just blew my mind. And this guy, literally, I was dancing. And it was probably about 3 a.m. at this point. This guy was the tallest guy in there, just went rigid, and he had an epileptic fit on the floor. And I'm not joking, not one person, apart from me, took notice of it and trying to drag this 6'4" guy out to.
It's worth saying that people die in clubs all the time, but it doesn't get reported on. Glastonbury, people die every single year, it never gets reported on.
Yeah.
Like, every now and then might get reported on, but it's. People were like, oh my God, there's someone died at a club. I'm like, it happens all the time. Okay. When I then went on to work for Boiler Room and we would do these like 20,000 capacity raves, we had to have ambulances there, like on site. And like, I'd have to go into the medical tent every hour. Like,
off you did.
Well, no, did you know what? When I started doing the 20,000 shows, I would not get on it until the show finished or until an hour before the end, because I was like, something goes wrong at 20,000 cap show. When it's a nightclub and it's 500 people, it's a bit. Also, there's also a whole team that are there every weekend.
Yeah.
Whereas with Boiler Room, I'd be using a team for hire because I'd be going into a new country, doing an event, hiring a team. So I was like, this is on me to make sure this goes smoothly.
Yeah.
And I was like, if there's someone that overdoses and I'm high, like what the fuck? I'm the point person for the medics.
You must have seen some sights at Boiler Room.
Yeah, I've seen all sorts of things. So we moved to Margate. By this time, the second wedding date had been cancelled. So we ended up buying a place in Margate together. In hindsight, I think both of us probably knew that our relationship was in trouble. I then got headhunted for Boiler Room. So Boiler Room, then I got approached and they said they're starting a new team, which is basically like it was called the Rest of the World team. So Boiler Room were mainly doing stuff in like Europe. Mm-hmm. They wanted to now expand into Australia, Asia, South America, and needed someone to head up that team. So they asked me to come and do it. So it's worth saying that when I first started, I was like, fucking hell, I felt a bit out of my depth all of a sudden. Yeah. I was like king of the castle when I'm at the Phonox, but suddenly I'm like planning. We would sometimes just do a show in like the jungle and have to build a whole festival production in the jungle in South America. You also had to pay off the cartel as well, which is quite mental.
Whoa. Talk through that.
So anywhere in Mexico, is for an example, every bit of Mexico is a cartel has
gangs.
The gang will be like, that's our section.
Yeah.
And if you want to make money on that section, you have to pay them. Like there was a story, I don't remember, years ago, where a festival in Mexico, there was like a drive-by and they just shot into the festival. It's because they refused to pay the cartel. Basically, you have to pay the cartel and then the cartel in exchange keep you safe.
Yeah.
So we had to do that. Bear in mind, I'm not the one handing over the briefcase. I've got like a fixer in Mexico that goes and does all that stuff. He's just like, you've got to pay them this and that.
How do you know how to find a fixer?
You get a lot of people approach us.
So Boiler Room has a name as well, so.
Yeah, it's not difficult really. What was difficult is working out which ones were legit and which ones weren't. Yeah. But a lot of time you try and find someone that's got a track record, and they put on big events before in Mexico and stuff like that.
Did you do, in terms of drug buying over there, what was that like?
Again, that wasn't on me, that was the fixer. But yeah, so with Boiler Room, it got to a point now where my isolated using was really big, to the point where I would I would use, and it would be like quite a dark experience. It'd be like suicidal thoughts, all this kind of stuff. So I didn't like using in front of people anymore because I would have one line and it put me in that weird headspace. And when I first got back into Boiler Room, I was a bit like, I felt a bit out of my depth for a small amount of time, but then delivered a couple of really good shows. Like I was involved in the Fred Again show and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, do you know what? I can operate at this level and be good at it. It's fine. And it kind of gave me that confidence again.
But you weren't using?
No, not at shows.
At shows.
Yeah. It wouldn't really be until like half an hour before the end if the fixer was that way inclined as well, where he might be like, I've got a bag for us. And we'd be like, okay, cool. We'd have like a little celebration line and be like, look how good our event's been, kind of thing. But I would then go back to the hotel and use. And you also got to understand is when you're the Boiler Room man and you land and you meet the fixer just wants to please you. So they're like taking you out for bougie dinners, saying, what do you need? Do you need drugs? Like you're like the DJ basically.
Yeah.
I was essentially leading that DJ life without the glamour of actually doing the DJ sets. Yeah. It was just like doing all that stuff. But then, just getting on it in hotel rooms for days on end. Really, even more isolated than ever, more fun than ever, but then having to do the shows.
Were you worried about using drugs abroad?
No, because I pretty much just do it in a hotel. And also, you've got to bear in mind, I'm like...
You weren't getting them.
I weren't getting them, and also I was almost like insulated because I'm like...
Yeah.
You've also got to bear in mind is people that go to Boiler Room in South America and India and places like that are middle class.
Yeah.
It's not just some like you only have access to it if you're rich in them countries.
Yeah.
When you're rich in them countries, the law doesn't really apply to you.
No. Quite corrupt, isn't it?
Yeah, very corrupt. India was the worst. We used to have to pay the police. There was one time when we did a show in Bangalore, I think it was called, and we were doing it on this rooftop of a hotel, like a bougie hotel. We used to have someone just with a wad of cash in their pocket just stood outside for when the police came towards them, they'd quickly pay them off to stop them coming into the event. So the police came, paid them off, and then the guy like WhatsApped about an hour later and was like, the police are back again. And I was like, well, we're not bribing them again, we've already done it. Went downstairs, the police were like, we've got, and it was two different police, and they were like, oh no, we've not been bribed yet. I was like, we've already bribed you, like we're not bribing you again. They were like, no, you have to. And bear in mind, we're talking like thousands and thousands of English pounds, like not small amounts of money. And I basically refused, so they turned off all the lifts in the hotel so that no one, when the event finished, could get off the roof. Like for 3,000 people just stuck on this roof. And I was like, you can't, like, surely, and they were like, you have to pay us to turn the lifts back on. I was like, we've already paid you. Like, this is how dodgy the police are in places like that. And then what also happened is, like, my ex felt like I'd become even more distant. And I've also got this track record of getting a bit obsessive with my work.
Yeah.
And I remember what I was saying when I got the Boiler Room job and it started to go well, and she was like, oh, I've lost you to your job again, haven't I? Like that kind of chat. Because I had it in my mind that to be good at my job, I had to be obsessed with it. Yeah, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm worthy again. I found myself again. But the problem was that I now also had this new pattern, which was isolated using heavy volumes. The Boiler Room job also paid me really well, so suddenly I had more money again to just go back into going through quarters of cocaine and stuff.
So this isolated using, let's get into sort of the mental barriers here, because you're saying that you're having suicidal thoughts, but this is the power of the addict brain, because even though you know that now you're using has become not fun and you want to do it alone and you know kind of how that's going to turn out.
The way the addict brain works for me is that when I have that moment where I think I'm going to pick up, no one doesn't enjoy the first line.
No one.
No matter how dark it gets, that first little bit.
Yes.
My problem is that I would just, or you'd kid yourself, because I'd be like, oh, do you know what? This time, instead of getting a quarter, I'm going to get an eighth, and I'm going to do loads of little lines. Because my problem is I would do so much so quickly.
Yeah.
That I was like, my heart was coming out my chest, my arms would go numb. I would put myself in a real state. But each time before it happened, I'd be like, first of all, I'd be thinking that, that first line's going to be like heaven.
Yeah.
And also, this time, I'm not just going to bosh it all really quickly and then feel like I'm going to die.
Why do you think you did want to do it so quickly?
Because as soon as I'd have one line, I'd just have compulsion to keep going.
Mine was that. I would do massive lines.
Yeah, well, I'll do peak using, my minimum would be like half a gram in a line.
Yeah.
Which is like...
I would do like half a gram, split it, then put one up each nostril.
Yeah, but the problem was I used to set my timer at half an hour to be like, do not have more before half an hour. And I'd be like looking at my clock to be like...
But all the time you're making it, preparing it.
Yeah, it'd just be there in front of me in like a pile and I'm almost like nurturing it.
Yeah.
It's like twisted.
Yeah.
But like, my problem is I would do the half a gram or whatever, and then I would literally be... I've had this thing, and I don't know if it's common with anyone else, my left... It would feel like my heartbeat's here, like in my shoulder. Like I'd get a really strong pulse here, and then my whole left arm would go numb. It's almost like having a stroke or a heart attack or something. Yeah. and my heart, and I was struck. I couldn't breathe properly, and there'd even be times where I'd have my phone in my hand and I'd have 999 ready to call it because I thought I was about to have a heart attack or overdose or whatever, and then it would wear off and I'd do it again.
Yeah.
And I'd just repeat that pattern sometimes for like 2 days straight, and then at the end of it, and also every single muscle in my body would be tense, like I was flexing.
I had that.
So I'd wake up after the 2 days, I could barely get out of bed. For me, even before I told anyone, I would constantly think, why am I doing this to myself? Because not only is it hell really when you're in it, it's also the aftermath of like the physical exhaustion and how bad you are in your head. The only thing I can think is it's almost like a form of self-harm. Like that's the only thing I can think, because it wasn't. That's what I've struggled to explain to anyone that isn't in addiction or hasn't been in addiction. They just can't make sense of that behaviour. And I can't either really, but it's mad how many people that I've met since being on this journey that have had similar patterns of using to me. That's what the biggest eye-opener for me when I went to my first NA meeting is that other people did similar to me. I was just like, no one else sits in a dark room really having a heart attack and pays loads of money for it.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? And then I met people and was like, oh, actually they do.
Yeah. So you leave that relationship, that sort of...
Yeah, left that relationship. It kind of all came to a head for a number of reasons. To be honest, it really slowly fell apart. And then we had one big argument one day, had some time apart, and then basically we're like, shall we just call it a day? And at the time, I was so unhappy in myself. I hadn't really got any happier from getting the boiler room job. I hadn't really recovered mentally from the whole COVID stuff. And was like, why have I not? And I think in my heart of hearts, I definitely knew it was the addiction thing, but it was also... I'd had periods of being clean around them times. I'm not talking long periods, I'm talking like a month here, a month there.
Yeah, I used to be able to do
Stuff like
2
that.
weeks, but then I deserve a bender.
But it wouldn't make me happier, because I think the difference was between then and now is that I was just what they call white knuckling, right? I'm just resisting rather than actually making shifts.
You can get sober, as in get rid of the external shit, the substance, but if you don't get emotionally sober...
That's the thing for me, is I would resist. There was one time where I remember being at an after party and everyone was doing coke off a plate and I didn't do it, and I remember thinking, I've done it. I've actually been around it, had a few drinks and literally had passed the plate on and like not done it, and then thinking, I've done it. But then a week later I'm back on it again. But the problem was when I got into them periods of clean, my relationship was still really bad. So I was like, it's the relationship. I'm always looking for the things making me unhappy.
Never once are you thinking, it's a Ryan problem.
Yeah. That's been my problem my whole life. I'm always looking around at me and being like, who's making me unhappy?
That was the thing that blew me away the most. Like when I started doing fellowship, and someone, I'll never forget it, just sat there and was like, they were doing a main share in a CA meeting, and they just said those exact words that stuck with me forever and a day, which is that I don't have... This person was saying, I don't have a drug and alcohol problem. I've got a me problem.
You've got to bear in mind as well, it's not like this pattern with my ex was a new pattern. I've been in a few long-term relationships, what you define as long-term, but it's been the same pattern every time for me. So at some point I've got to be like, it isn't always them, is it? It's me. Yeah. And I kind of knew that, to be honest. And it's not like, what's weird is, it wasn't like I was ever abusive or like cheated or anything like that. It was more nuanced and subtle than that.
But also, you can't connect with them on the level ever really with anyone until you've connected with yourself.
Every girlfriend I ever had was always just like, there's something. And even though I would sit and talk for hours, there would still be like, there's something there in between. There's a barrier. Like a bit like when I said to you about I'd share a bit but hold a bit back. And I think that was probably palpable to them people that I lived with and had long-term relationships with. They could feel that more because they're around me all the time. And I can be playing this role in a little way, but ultimately there's not that real connection.
Do you think that's because when you ever were being vulnerable, it was always drug-induced?
I don't think I was any more vulnerable when I was high, to be honest. No. Probably less so, actually.
So what do you think, if you've worked out what it is that you've been holding back with people?
I just think maybe the stuff with my parents, maybe the stuff with James dying, maybe I moved out when I was really young, obviously became independent really young, so I always just felt like I look after myself and I had to protect myself. I think
as well, like having but having drugs in your family home, not necessarily with the stepdad situation or whatever you would call him.
Yeah.
That situation, that is quite unique. And then with the fact that you were around that working environment with drugs so early on, like 18, but being around older men who are behaving like that, like it is. But it's all these things that we just go, Yeah, but that's just my path. That's the path I've gone on. That's just the cards I've
When
been
I
dealt.
was in rehab, we had one of the. I at the time thought it was a part of the 12 steps, but it wasn't. It was like the precursor to starting the 12 steps. We had to write our life story connected to drugs, and it wasn't until I wrote it all down on paper and read it back and was like, first of all, coke's been in every single part of my professional life, which is weird. Like, not many people have every job they've had in different industries has all been people taking coke at work. And two, like, just the age I was at, it was all just there. It was present the whole time in different
Normalised.
forms. Normalised. As normal as anything else, like getting ordering a takeaway, basically. So it's like, and I think that plays a big part. But I think weirdly, using almost became like my safe space. It became like my best friend.
Absolutely.
Because it was where I didn't have to meet expectations. It's where I didn't have to be something someone wanted me to be. I could just close the door and use, and there was nothing. And that was when I could be, as much as I might feel like I'm having a heart attack, I'm almost not trying to serve someone else. I'm just there, and it was my safe space.
Comforting.
And that's when I would then think about using it. That's the bit I think I would think about rather than actually you're gonna. And also, like I said before, I never thought I'm going to do a massive line and have a heart attack. I would think, this time I'm going to do it in a better way, or I don't feel as edgy or whatever. But then would always just fall back into
It's the resilience we have as well. Like, even if we try to say to ourselves, "Oh, I'm not going to do it again," because you've survived and got back up and brushed yourself down so many times. You know, that playing the tape forward thing. I never did that until I surrendered to sobriety. Like, in the past, I would be like, oh my God, yeah, I know I'm going to feel shit, but I'm going to feel so good and I'll get over it because I've got over it so many times before.
Also, I don't know about you, but the amount of times I would be getting, like, say, for example, I had like a work thing the following day and I wouldn't sleep, I'd roll through.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, oh my God, and then the work thing would go well. So I'd be like, do you know what? Actually, it's fine. Like, I can do this.
Yeah.
All that anxiety was pointless because it was fine. Like, I'd done a presentation whilst no sleep or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and there's all them little things that you then use it to justify it. What I quickly realised is that living alone and liking to use drugs in isolation was not a good combination because it meant that I could just come home and use whenever I wanted. And that's when them little stolen pockets of time became days. And then the boiler room job was like a hybrid work from home situation, so I'd only have to go into the office 2 days a week, which I think was like a Wednesday, Thursday. So sometimes I'm like...
That's like bliss for a drug user, right? Because
I'd sometimes pick up on the Thursday in London, because I had like the good stuff in London. I'd literally pick up like 7 grams of like pure cocaine, like we're talking like 600-700 quid's worth, take it back to Margate, and then just like roll through on it. I then started to almost have like a bit of a using diary, where it'd be like, I know that if I start using on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, stop. By the time Wednesday comes around, I'm kind of
back fine to get to the office
being on form. But over that little period, the stopping on Saturday became stopping on Sunday, became stopping on Monday, became stopping on Tuesday, became rolling, going to work on no sleep. But I wouldn't be going 5 days straight, but I'd sleep in between, but then reload and stuff like that. And it all just started coming apart at the edges. And I'd often going to work, having not slept, wait till like 2 p.m, go and order drugs, do it in the office, stuff like that.
When you woke up feeling pretty shit in the periods of those 5 days, were you getting reordering because you just didn't want to feel shit again, or
I just couldn't get enough? Like, I'm not. I know.
See, once I went to sleep, that was, or at least tried to, those next 2 days. But what happened to me is the days in between became less.
Yeah.
So like, I remember it would be like, I mean, this is probably 5 years ago, but like when I would do a Friday through to Sunday session, and I sat in that binge phase for years. But very quickly, it was Friday through to a Sunday, and then I'd introduce like a midweek sesh. But that midweek sesh would be a nightmare because I never had that thing of being, and this is when I had working for other people, it'd be a nightmare because I would never have an off button. So I would go to work high or with no sleep and then taking interval fucking sleep breaks in a disabled toilet just to get through the day.
Yeah, I did the same. Use the toilet rolls.
And when I then had my own business, then I could sort of plan things a lot. This whole scheduling your drug taking, that's when things sort of started to get worse. But I would definitely have this thing of like, if I got done one of those Friday through to Sunday sessions and then I wouldn't take a 2-week break because I'd be like, God, that was mad. And I wouldn't even think about it. I'd be disgusted by coke, alcohol, fags. I wouldn't go anywhere near them. And then this is what I'm saying to people who are maybe in that phase now, to not be ignorant to the fact that it can go to that next stage very quickly.
Yeah.
Especially now, lots of us have hybrid working jobs where, like, if you don't have that
lack of structure and accountability, doesn't suit me.
No.
Yeah, and I think, but again, I would always justify it because I was like, but
I've got a good job.
But I've got control of it. I still go into work. I'm never late for work. All this stuff. A lot of the time, if I hadn't slept, I'd go into work early because I'd be like,
I do that because I don't want to sit there waiting. I do that.
I'd be like, I need to get like comfortable with work and like have a coffee or whatever it is, and then and I try to interact as least as possible with people, to put my headphones in or whatever. But also around this time, I met Amy. Me and Amy we met on the beach. Our dogs started interacting and we started chatting about our dogs and whatever. And actually, she was like talking about how she really likes DJ EZ, and I was like, oh, guess what I do as a job? I'm really cool, and kind of like played that card, slid into her DMs, and said, let's go for a dog walk. And then we started dating. And as we first started dating, I had another period of getting off of it. So for our first like 3 dates, I think, I wasn't using at all. So it was really nice. And first of all, I was paying for everything, like doing the kind of regal thing about picking up the bill and stuff. And then relapsed, I can't remember the exact timeline, but probably a month into us dating. And this was like, I don't know about you, but every time I'd get clean and then relapse, the relapse would just be way more intense than the using pattern before. My amounts of usage would go up.
You ruin drug taking for yourself.
Yeah.
Once you start thinking that it's a problem.
And then at this point,
trying to abstain.
Yeah, exactly. Because then also, you'd almost just, once you then realise, you just be like, oh, fuck it, I'm not even going to resist. And that was when I was ordering like, these £600-700 quarters and doing like sometimes 2 or 3 of those a week. So like, mad money. And then it sometimes gets to the point where I'd like, and also another thing where I knew that I was really losing control is that previous times I'd get to the point where I'd have like, I don't know, £300 in my bank account and be like, I need to keep that because I've got to get to work, I've got to live, whatever. Now I would just go until it was zero, and then be like, oh, Dad, I've had to pay an unexpected vet bill, can you lend me money? Stuff like that. But also then I'd be going out for dinner with Amy and be like, fuck, I've now got into this pattern where I'm paying for stuff, but I can't really pay for it anymore because I've got £200 in my bank account. Or being like, I hope we don't get that second bottle of wine because it's like I'm not going to be able to pay the bill.
Yeah. Stuff
like that. And then she has then reflected and said to me she really noticed the change. It's like the lightness in me, she said, went away. Like,
were you honest with her then about any of it?
Sometimes we'd go out for dinner, get quite drunk together, and then rather than like go back or carry on, I'd just be like, I need to go back to mine because I've got to do something tomorrow. But I just wanted to go back and get on it.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. So she started to notice. She actually said before it reached the head that she was considering splitting up with me. She was like, she thought I had depression because she was like, I'd sometimes, and again, talking about the using diary, if I knew we were going to have like a date night on the Saturday, my plan would always be like, right, I'm going to use Thursday and stop Friday afternoon, or like try and keep myself that, but then I wouldn't. I'd go all the way through and then see her on no sleep and slept for 2 days. And obviously, no matter how good I was at hiding it, I often think about them sorts of things and wonder if people knew.
Yeah.
Like I'd be at, like, I don't know, some toddler's birthday thing and I'd be getting on it secretly and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then thinking, oh, no one can tell. But I don't know, I can't. Maybe, I think it's a bit like what we were saying before. I think the people that know, like I reckon if I knew you then, I probably would have been like, are you getting on it?
Yeah.
But maybe people that aren't as involved in that world probably don't know to even look for the signs, you know what I mean?
So she
was like, it's either depression or drugs. She was questioning, but she started to lean more towards more being mental health thing.
And did she talk to you about it?
She would ask, is there something we need to talk about and stuff like that, and I would just deflect all the time. I felt like if I told Amy, there might be some level of understanding, but I still couldn't quite bring myself to do it.
Do you think that was because you didn't want it to stop, or do you think it's because she was going to be judgmental?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
I also thought that she would probably leave, and we hadn't been together that long, so it's not like you're years deep and there's some investment there. We were still basically dating, so it's like, why would she stick around for something like that? But that all kind of went on for a while. But basically, my sister's got a daughter who's I'm really close with, really, really, really close with. She doesn't, the dad's not in the picture, so I kind of try and take on that kind of like male positive influence in her life and stuff like that. And even throughout all the using, I've always managed to be my best self most of the time around her. A couple of times, maybe not so much, but generally I would be. There's this one time where my sister was going to come and visit. So my sister's like, oh, we're going to book in the next time we come and see you. And it was I think it was on a Saturday. So classic thing, I was like, right, I'm going to pick up 7 grams on the Wednesday, but I'm going to go Wednesday, Thursday, and then stop.
There's the thing of always thinking that we're going to be able to stop.
Yeah, so absolute denial. Yeah. And also, even if I did stop then, I would still be knackered on the Saturday and having to do all these really active things with an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
But finished it all, got to Friday morning, whatever, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I'm not done. I just knew I wasn't done. But I was like, what I'm going to do this time, bear in mind as well, it's worth saying that I wasn't drinking. It was just gear. And
straight off the bat?
Yeah, straight off the bat.
Did it not make you... Was it enjoyable?
This is peak.
Yeah, I know.
And it wasn't. And it was never. This is what I try and explain with people with the alcohol. The alcohol wasn't really the trigger for me. It was like my head was the trigger. My mental.
Same, but I guess for me it was like I always felt like I had to have. I think for me it was like.
There were times where I'd buy alcohol and then I just wouldn't drink it.
I could forgive myself if I'd had a drink before.
Yeah, but at this point I was so deep in it that I was just like, I just want to take coke.
Did it not? But what I'm asking is, did it not have a different effect on you in terms of the high?
Yeah. Do you know what? The edginess from like the first couple of lines hasn't been a problem for me for a few years.
Okay.
That was really like early on. Or maybe I just quite started to like the edginess. I'm not sure. But yeah, so it got to the Friday morning. My sister's coming on the Saturday morning. And I'm like, I really want to keep going, but I know that if I get a big quantity now, I'm not going to be able to sleep, but I do want to do loads. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Boots and I'm going to buy a Nitol, which is like an over-the-counter sleep aid, which works, I find, to a point. And I'm going to buy a bottle of whiskey to like
knock you out.
To knock me out. So I think I get it's like an 8 ball this time. I'm not obviously going to do another 7 in like 10 hours. Not that mental. So anyway, yeah, so I do it
mind the chat
on it, but obviously at this point there's a lot of sleep deprivation and I'm getting really high, so your sense of time is like gone now. And all of a sudden I get a text from my sister being like, where my niece has woken up really early and is really excited, so we're going to come now at like 6 a.m. on Saturday. She's like maybe a 4-hour drive away. Right. So I was like, fuck, I've got 4 hours
to sort myself out.
And I maybe had like a gram left, so I was like, well, I'll just quickly do all of that.
Obviously going to do that.
Yeah. So in my twisted logic brain, I was like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour myself like, I don't know, like a regular glass size but of pure whiskey, say like a quarter of a bottle of whiskey or whatever. I'm going to do all the coke, drink the whiskey, take a few sleeping tablets, not one, a few, to make sure it hits me. And what will happen is, and also bear in mind, at this point, the flat's messy, there's paraphernalia and everything. I was like, the initial buzz of doing the gram in one go will give me energy to make me go and clean the flat.
Absolutely.
Then the drink and the sleep tablet will hit me and I'll knock out.
Yeah.
And I'll just set my alarm for in 3 hours' time, wake up. Ready. So I do that and then I don't remember anything. I black out. And I come to and it's night time and I'm in bed. And I'm like cut and bruised. I've like, as I go to move, I can feel like cuts on my arms and legs. I'm like, what's gone on? And it's one of the first times ever where I've been sick after a session. I've only ever been sick like 5 times in my life from being on it. I just don't get sick.
No, I didn't.
And yeah, as I went to sit up in bed, I just had that seasick feeling. I was like, oh, and I ran to go to the toilet and I started throwing up. And as I was throwing up, I could hear voices. And I was like, there's people in my flat. I just figured that, at this point, I hadn't even remembered that my sister was coming, like when I'd initially woken up. I was just like, I passed out from the sesh kind of thing and got myself into bed. I mean, I still was not even really thinking clearly, but anyway, threw up, heard voices, went into my lounge, and my niece is there, just playing on the table with her toys, and my sister and Amy are sat there. And I'm like, and they're like, hey, how you doing? Did you have a nice sleep? And I'm like, so in my head, I'm like, I must have got away with it.
Yeah, because your niece is there, they're being...
Yeah, so they're not saying anything, but I'm like, oh, maybe I've got away with it. But then as I go to sit down and kiss Amy, I kind of notice her like coldness, and I'm like, okay, something's gone on. And also I've got these cuts on me. And then I'm kind of looking around at my flat, and my flat's spotless. So I'm like, I must have cleaned my flat.
But is the atmosphere like you could tell?
Kind of, but I kind of focused on my niece and started playing with her. And just like, whatever, and she was like, "Oh, uncle, you were asleep when I came in or whatever." I couldn't really. My whole brain's like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's happened?"
Have I mastered it?
Yeah, but I couldn't work it out. But then it wasn't really long. It was probably only about half an hour before my niece then went to bed. Amy then went straight to bed as well, and it was just me and my sister.
So they'd obviously planned what they were.
Maybe, and then my sister was just like, "What's going on?" And I was like, I remember I said about how I'd half-assed told people before. My sister I'd half told before, but never actually then followed it up. So she was like, "Are you still taking drugs?" And I was like, "Yeah." So she then proceeds to tell me what's happened. She arrives in Margate, texts me and says, "We're here." I then text back and say, "I had a big party last night. I'm tidying my flat," which I don't remember even texting her. Which I guess at that time I must have. I don't know. I guess the booze or whatever, something caused my brain to stop remembering. But I must have got up and started tidying. But I think it must have been a sight to behold, because I've knocked over loads. I've got like a feature wall in my flat. It's got all like bits of art on it and stuff. Everything's just smashed. I think, and that's why I've got all cuts everywhere. I'm like walking, and also she said there was glass all over the floor, and I was just walking around in it in bare feet. So she says, and I say, "Oh, give me a bit more time. I'm tidying the flat. I had a bit of a party last night, and I don't want my niece to see it like that." So she's like, "Okay, fine." She goes and has like a coffee on the beach. 2 hours pass, and I'm no longer replying to any messages. She then messages Amy, and is like, "Are you with Ryan? Like, he had a party last night." Amy was like, "He didn't have a party last night." So then Amy's like, "Something's going on." So then Amy comes and meets them. They come to the flat. And I've double locked the door. I did anyway, would always do a double lock.
Of course.
Barricade myself in, kind of thing. And I've got music blaring really loud. And they're banging on the door, whatever, not getting anything. And I live in a ground floor flat. So my sister then comes round the back of the building and sees that the window into my lounge is open. But it's not like you just hop in. It's like you have to like climb over this fence, get on this wall, like go along the wall and like get into the window. And she said she climbed into the window and I was just stood in my kitchen, just like off, like she said something to me and I just replied, and it could have been in like Swahili. It made no sense. And she climbed in, saw the glass everywhere, had blood on me, and she was speaking to me, and I was replying, but nothing. There was nothing even forming like anything like a word or a sentence. I was making no sense. So she then was like, "My niece is outside. She can't see me like this." So she straight away just put me into my bedroom and shut the door. Quickly, like got rid of as much kind of damning evidence as she could, and then kind of came outside and was like, obviously to Amy, "Yeah, we need to kind of go in and tidy up." But to my niece, Ryan's had a party with some friends last night, so we're just going to help him tidy up while he goes to sleep. Kind of just like, you can't just say, she has to say something to my niece. What really hurt me is that my niece came in, and so my niece, the reason her dad's not in the picture is because he was physically abusive to my sister in front of her, and she'd witnessed that as a young child. She got really scared. And she was like, "Mummy, this is like," I guess she was like triggered by it, which obviously was a bit, the part that when my sister told me I found really hard to accept, that I would like, be responsible for causing her fear. So my sister told me all this that then happened, and she said put me into bed and tidied the flat, and then obviously however long later I woke up, and she's obviously like, "What's going on?" Because that's, there's taking drugs and there's
taking drugs and then
what
it's taking drugs.
I found you in, days of no sleep. God knows how shocking it must have been to my sister to see me with blood on me, having not slept for days, having now drank this whiskey and sleeping tablets, and just like,
Also losing the power to even hide it, right? Like thinking that you had all the plans in place to try to.
It's like building up to that. It was coming apart the seams, and suddenly it was just like the kind of floodgate opened, and that was it. And then I basically just told her, I was like, "This has been this big problem for me for a long time." Didn't go massively into it because she then went to bed. I then got into bed and Amy was still awake, and Amy was like, "So you've got a coke addiction?" Or she said something along those lines, and I just said, "Yeah." And she was like, "Has this been going on this whole time? Is this why?" And we just had a big chat, and I told her as well. Then the next morning...
And how did she respond to that?
She was like sad for me more than anything. She just kind of hugged me, because I cried my eyes out basically when I told her. And it was like,
fat come down as well.
Yeah, imagine. Completed come down for sure. But weirdly, when I woke up the next day, I felt kind of like liberated.
Well,
because I was like, suddenly I said it out loud.
People know.
Yeah, and then my sister was like, maybe we shouldn't tell mum and dad, and I was like, Janet, you know what? I think I just want to tell everyone. I just need to get this monkey off my back once and for all, and actually, this just has to be the time it happens. I wonder how long it would have taken for that conversation to happen if that incident hadn't happened. I think it would have happened because I think I was getting close to rock bottom. Like I was getting, like my boss at work was like, "What's happening with you?" Like things were being noticed.
Yeah.
I'd spent all this time being able to mask it, at least thinking I was masking it really well. There probably was signs. But this was now getting to the point where I couldn't mask it anymore. It was really getting a hold of me and really actually ruining my life. And yeah.
So the next steps from there were?
The next steps were that I then told my mum and dad. I can't remember the exact timeline, but probably within that few days, told my mum and dad.
How did that go? Because there's a lot of people who worry about that part of it. I actually had somebody, obviously won't say who it was, but messaging me the other day, and they're young, they live at home, and they're using every day, and the parents don't know, and they're worried that they will see them differently. I
get a lot of messages like that all the time.
I do,
and I think the thing I always say, and the thing I'll say here, is like if your parents love you, you'll be amazed by how understanding they'll be.
And most parents love their children.
Yeah,
the majority.
And I think I was so convinced that they would be like angry or ashamed or embarrassed, but they weren't. They were maybe shocked a bit, but their immediate reaction was sympathy and love and support. And I really find it hard to believe that any parent that loves their child would be any different. They're definitely going to have a little bit of a thing in their head where they're like trying to make sense of it, but ultimately they're going to see someone that needs help who they love and they're going to help them.
I think what you have to expect is that your parents are going to go through phases with it as well. It's that initial.
I've had that with my mum.
Yeah, that initial conversation. Usually, when you're having to have that, is you're at the gift of desperation time. So they're not the majority of parents are going to wrap you up and want to take care of you and just get it.
I think as
I'm
well.
going to ask loads of questions, but as it starts to unravel,
I think as well, people need to understand that everyone in their life has a version of this thing. It's not necessarily that they're a massive addict, but it's going to be something in their life that makes someone happy that they want to talk about.
Yeah.
And they're going to, like the way I've always thought about it as well is flip the role. Imagine if someone you love come to you with that.
Yeah.
Imagine like.
I actually said to the person on the other day who got in touch with me about this, I said, imagine if this was your child. Imagine if you were the parent. Would you want to be told? And of course you would. And how would you react to that? You wouldn't react to it with anger. Or...
It's also worth me saying as well that my parents were understanding, but not only that, I've got like aunties and uncles in their like 60s and 70s that are like old-fashioned people really, that have been nothing but loving and supporting. Like, I've been amazed by people's reactions.
When I started the page, I realised that addiction though affects like everyone in some way, because if you know someone who has a problem with it, then you're affected by it. If your friend is, if your brother is, if your uncle is, if your uncle is, then your mother's affected by it because it's her brother.
I think the most beautiful part of what your channel does and what my channel does is has them conversations. Like I was playing golf on Sunday with a guy I didn't know. It was like I just got Drew with him, and we started chatting. Obviously, then it's like, "What do you do?" Blah blah. And I'm always a bit like, and he was like a older guy, a high school headmaster.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, I want to talk about this because I don't know how it will land. And do you know what? And in the end, I was just like, after saying a couple of different things, I was like, I'm an addict. I went to rehab, and I'm basically the reason I'm not really working probably right now is because I'm in recovery. And he was like, my daughter had an overdose recently. And then we ended up having these like deeper meaningfuls between every shot. We're like pretty much like hugging. Yeah. And he was like, and I told him about the channel, and he was like, I wish my daughter had something like that. I wish my daughter had like an outlet like that. Yeah. Blah blah blah. And it's like
it's funny how when you become honest about something, it opens it up to other people. The trickle effect of all of it, I find very humbling, very fascinating, and like how willing people are to open up to you. But the thing is the other thing that comes with that is that how willing some people are to open up to a stranger on the internet because you've made yourself so.
I try and make it clear when I speak to these people, because there's obviously some people which I think you're the same that I've now been talking to for months on and off, and I'm like, I can't be your outlet. Like, yeah, I'll talk to you and I'll speak on what's happened for me, but I can't be the person that's your recovery is based on. Like, you need to speak to someone close to you, like in real life.
What I find fascinating is that you can be willing to talk to the reason why you're willing to talk to that person is because you see so much of yourself in that person. Whereas speaking to a family member or someone who, you don't think gets you, that's a bit more terrifying.
But like you said, I think no matter who it is, your family will have some sort of experience of addiction via a friend or whatever. There'll be some sort of loose, even if it's just a music artist that they like that took loads of drugs and got clean or whatever. They're gonna have some. It's gonna be in their world in some way.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can wrap our parents up in these images of, oh, but they're my parents. It's like your parents had lives before they had you.
I remember when my dad first found out with weed, and I was like, Dad, how did you manage to work it out? It's like, I did the same thing when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like you didn't invent taking drugs and being deceptive.
You're not doing anything special to person.
And I think that's the problem is people kind of look at their parents as from this other place, but they're not really. They're the same as us. Like you're literally made from them. So it's like
and they're just a little bit further down the line than you, and they're also still growing up, and they're also still learning, and you have to be a bit sympathetic towards that. You don't, but I think honesty is a really important thing to.
I also just think, I don't know about you, but I for so long was convinced that I was going to be able to get sorted by myself, and it was only really once that stuff with my sister happened and that domino effect of them telling people, I actually realised that the support network is so vital for me. Like it's that extra bit of something behind you, holding you up a little bit, is invaluable. Like you convince yourself that you can beat it by yourself, but if you're years into this pattern, and the reality is you probably can't.
Yeah, because you've proven it to yourself so many times that you can't do it, and that's when it's time to give up the fight. Like you stop negotiating with it because you've tried, and you're not winning.
There was a guy when I was in rehab that was like someone who'd been a client and was now like maybe a few years clean and sober, and he said to me when we were chatting, he was like, your addict brain is cleverer than you are. You think that you can work it out, but what you've got to understand is that muscle, the addict's brain muscle, is the muscle you've probably flexed more than any other for years and years and years. And now, however clever you think you are, your addict brain is at least as clever or cleverer, because that's the part of your brain that's been deceptive, that's enabled this behaviour, and it's always going to keep doing that. It's also the neural pathway thing, right? So that well-trodden path between like I want to use to using is like one of the most well-trodden neural pathways in your brain.
Yeah,
it is way more stronger than not, the sign you're not going to, or any other neural pathway really. Like I did loads of work around CBT and the think model, I think it's called. And it's all about the fact that you've created this really strong thing, and it's a repeated pattern that is reinforced every time you do it for years and years and years and years. And it's going to always be there. You just have to get the tools to deal with it.
I think you have to really, no matter what, you have to really want it.
For me, I think I'd found my rock bottom. So when I told my family, I then got clean again for about a month. And I was just like, doing great.
Pink cloud, I've nailed it.
And then had a relapse and nearly died, basically. Nearly overdosed, was like the fuck it button was well and truly pushed at this point. And I was like, because by this point, people knew.
Yeah.
So therefore, the shame and accountability was even bigger. And I was like, oh my God. And I've got that liberation. That is enough to keep me sober, clean for that period. But then that becomes normal. And then I'm like,
It's like you're addicted to that buzz.
Yeah, but then that buzz isn't giving me enough anymore. And I'm like, I need to go back to that thing that's been giving me what I need for years and years and years. Relapsed. And again, it was one of those where I'm sure it was, I don't remember exactly now, but I'm sure it was like, oh, it's just a bag. And then it's like 4 days later. But that was when, and then I was doing like grams in one go and like properly nearly turning my phone off, locking Amy out of the flat. All this like fucked up shit. Amy's trying to like keep my door down. All this stuff. She's thinks I'm dead because I've not replied for days on end. It got like really dark, and then it was like, okay, the next thing is rehab. Because by this point, I'd also started going to meetings and kind of doing that stuff. Meetings
pre-relapse.
Yeah, relapse.
How did you find which meetings did you go to first?
First time, I've only ever been to NA meetings, and the first one I went to was like this Monday one. And there's not many times in my life I've been more scared in my life. I was shaking like a leaf.
Yeah.
Like literally, I felt like if someone blew at me, I'd fall over.
Yeah.
Like I was so nervous, and I remember getting in there, sitting down, and everyone was like eating bourbon biscuits and dunking them in tea, and I was like, "How can you eat right now?" I'm like beside myself. And they would like hand out the biscuit, like give me the biscuit packet, and I was too scared to lift my arm up because I'd be like, like wobbling with fear. And I was just like, how are these people able to consume biscuits right now?
It's
so,
such a calming,
everyone's just comparing their favourite biscuits.
It's the weirdest thing. Because you're the first meeting is just.
I was like, my brain was
so
just
happy.
I was like really, really beside myself. Like I can't remember feeling that uncomfortable in my own skin for a long time. But I'd say about halfway through it, I started to I was also sitting like that to try and hide the fact that I was visibly shaking. And then about halfway through, I was like, I started, like everyone always says, you hear the stories, and suddenly I was like, wait a minute, this is these people understand. And I ended up sharing. I ended up being the last person.
First meeting,
which apparently is not normal.
No,
but I was the last person to share. Like, do that thing. There's 5 minutes left. What did someone else want to share? I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. And I shared and cried a bit and said it was my first meeting. And obviously, as soon as you say it's your first meeting, everyone's like, oh, hugs you and swaps numbers with you. And I loved it. And then and I've got a lot of opinions on NA and AA, as people might have seen before. But the meetings, I think, as an initial step, if you're struggling, is a really good. I'd always, whenever anyone messages me on TikTok, I always recommend go to a local meeting, because it gives you that feeling of not being alone, which I think really helps.
But also, if you don't want to tell close loved ones, right? I get it, but there's got to be a phase. There's got to be that next step of there's a problem. There's got to be that next step of this self-admission and doing that in front of anyone. Even if it's not going to be your friends and family, doing it in a room full of strangers, even
saying it out loud, I think to a real person just takes the power out of it. It really does. And I've had people then be like, "Oh yeah, but I'm worried that I recognise someone." I'm like, "Go to the next town then."
You've got to get over that, and I don't ever usually be.
Also, if you see someone in that meeting, they ain't going to be judging you because they're in that meeting
exactly,
as well.
and you're not that special. Yeah, you're not that special.
I think going to meetings makes you realise that.
It really
does.
You
haven't got this unique thing. It's actually
it really does.
way more common.
But you just this whole thing of oh my god, what if someone sees me and knows I'm a drug addict? Fundamentally, if you're a drug addict, people probably know anyway.
And also, I think that people think that everyone cares about everyone else a lot more than they do. Most people are worried about themselves. Do you know what I mean? They're not looking around all the time at everyone else, especially if they're not that close to you. They're not going to really care. I
think if you're that desperate to get better, you'll drop the thing of religion and
there's small hurdles which are and they say about looking for the similarities and things like that. And I really found, and I'm guilty of it still now a bit, getting really put off by a lot of the language around NA. But I think you need to look at the bits that
try being a woman
having
that literature. It's written in the 1940s. It's all about a male alcoholic or a male addict. You have to change every time it says male. You got to change it to female, and I just skip some parts. I do you can get apart and get really in amongst those meetings, and you will feel it can give off that culty that you can. Or you can go to those meetings and take what you need from them. And
for me, what's always worked for me is just the stories, the shares. Yeah, so I'd started going to the meetings, but then it was decided to rehab. But then I was like, right, I'm going to tell work.
But hang on, you do. So you've had this moment with your sister, then you've told your family and friends, then you've been clean for a month and gone to a couple of meetings.
Yeah, I've gone to quite a few meetings. I was going to maybe 2 or 3 a week.
Okay, then how do we get to the relapse?
I can't exactly remember. I think I just decided I was going to pick up.
Do you not think were you not worried about the fact that or you not even thinking about that? You just
I had that mental gymnastics and I somehow managed to I think my justification was, I'm really honest, I'm just going to do a bag and no one wants to know.
Yeah. Secrecy.
But I did the bag, and that's one of the. I think my drug dealer must have been like, "What the hell?" Because instead of getting seven, I got one, then 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 one for 4 days, and then was like, "Oh, actually," and then just went back into getting 7. So then, obviously, I couldn't use it like that and it not then being found out. So it was all found out. Amy was the one who actually then texted my family and were like, "Ryan's in trouble," kind of thing. It was then decided that I would go to rehab, and we started looking into different places, looked into places in the UK, but it was just crazy, crazy expensive.
How much money are we talking? Because I'm interested to know.
15 grand for a 4-week program. I've got a lot to say on rehab in the UK. It's a broken system. There's one guy that basically, and there's been a watchdog thing on him, who has a monopoly on rehab facilities in the UK. They're insanely expensive, 15 grand for 4 weeks is one of the cheaper ones.
Oh,
it's nuts. And so I was looking at them all, and at that point, especially after this relapse, I think I probably had like £200 in my bank account. My parents aren't necessarily wealthy. Anyway, so we were looking. It was a place called White River Recovery Centre in South Africa.
White River.
I've never thought about that.
That's my addict brain. Anything. Someone said to me about a white Christmas, I think straight away I'm just like, okay.
That never crossed my mind.
White River's quite funny.
White River Recovery Centre, and it was good. It was really, really good. Like, it was pretty intense because it was like they work with the Dutch government, so there's lots of people that have got a choice. Like they get arrested or something. Like the guy I shared a room with, for example, he's just alcohol, but he kept writing off Porsches. He actually told me a really funny story about. He wrote off his Porsche, and it was like the third Porsche he'd written off. So he was like, "Oh my god, I've got to go and." He saw the police coming, so I'm going to go and hide in the bush. But he was hiding next to the bush and didn't realise, and he's just like sat like this. And the police just walked over and was like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Oh shit, I thought I was undercover." Which is really, really, really strict. Like I got strip searched and tested and all this stuff when I arrived. You get every time you go anywhere, you have to then do drug tests and alcohol breathalyzers and stuff.
So were you allowed out of the facility?
We would go on bike rides, supervised bike rides with one of the counsellors. I did a golf day. We did safari. Yeah, we would do like away day kind of things.
Oh, it sounds idyllic.
It was lovely, but like quite prisony. Like you get woken up with a torch in the face at 6 a.m.
Okay.
Then you'd have to mop and clean your room and then get inspected. Then you'd go and do meditation. Then you'd go and have breakfast. Then you'd have what's called morning duties, where everyone would have a different duty. Like mine was raking the lawns because it was autumn in South Africa, so we'd rake the lawns of all the leaves, and there's a lot of land. But you'd have other ones like cleaning out the horse stables, whatever. And then the programs would start, and it'd normally be like one-on-one session with a therapist, either addiction, CBT. What was another one? Like different types of therapy. And then there'll be group sessions all around different things like play the tape forward or what's your neural pathways, all this.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. And then in the evenings it would be, one evening was AA meeting, one evening was NA meeting, one evening was board games, Fridays and Saturdays were movie nights.
Were you allowed your phone?
No. No phone, no contact with the outside world other than 2 50-minute phone calls. So it's worth saying that, so then just to go back slightly, before I did rehab, I was like, I have to tell Boiler Room.
Right.
But also what was happening on the side at this point, I was getting in trouble at work because my assistant had gone to the bosses and said that Ryan's basically a shit boss. And I'd then gone into a meeting but didn't know that it was going to be a meeting about that. I had not slept for 3 days and then was suddenly sat in front of the board and was like, they were like, are you being a shit boss? And I said, I'm having a bit of a mental health problem at the moment because I had that heavy breakup and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, kind of cut me some slack. But I think I was about to get sacked, basically. Well, I kind of was about to get sacked. My boss was then like, rang him up and was like, look, I've got this thing. I'm basically addicted to coke. I think he maybe suspected it anyway. And he was like, okay, well... And I was like, and I think I need to leave the music industry. So he was like, look, if you resign, if you hand in your resignation, we'll pay you 3 months' money. So that enabled me to pay towards rehab, but it wasn't actually enough because I had other money I had to pay off and stuff towards the flat. And then Amy ended up then having to put money in, my mum put money in, like everyone kind of helped. Because it was the £6,000 for the programme, but then money for the flights. There was other stuff to pay for.
How much did it sort of come out at? 10 grand?
No, less than that, maybe 8.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, so then this is the first time I've kind of spoken about this stuff properly. And like, I've never had therapy before where I've been too honest, I don't think. This was the first time where
Me too.
I feel like I was ready to be like, right, I just need to talk. Like I would find myself like really looking forward to the therapy, whereas before I'd always be like, oh my god, I've got therapy, I'm dreading it.
Yeah.
And it really worked. I was journaling every day. I suddenly, like I've always really been...
What did you work out there about yourself?
One of the biggest breakthroughs for me was negative self-talk. I was like, why am I still finding ways to beat myself up and put pressure on myself? And then I zoomed out further and I was like, wait, this is my whole life. I do this. I get a job, I get a promotion, I do successful, I've got a good relationship. And I'm still like, you're not good enough. And ultimately it come down to that self-worth thing. And I was like, and as soon as I kind of heard the voice consciously for the first time, I then started to do these practices where when it happened, I would flip it. And I'd be like, no, but what have I done that's good? And I'd try and change it and try and change the narrative. And I started trying to apply that to everything. And I would journal every day and do gratitude. And I'd just try and if I'd had a negative thought thing or got into one of those headspaces, I would write it down. And I just started doing stuff like that and just making it more like tangible.
Have you pinpointed yet where your lack of self-worth stemmed from?
You were a family. I think my family situation. My mum, if I'm honest, my mum had this weird thing where she would get really drunk and she would say, "You're special, and you're going to do something special in the world." And when you're like 10, you're like, "Oh, I'm special. I'm going to do something." But then I'd sometimes get a different kind of drunk and never really be abusive, but like would kind of more put me down. And I think that two things would really mess with my head. And I also think that I kind of remember going into like school and being like, "Oh, I'm better than these." I kind of had these thoughts of like, "I'm special, I'm different to these people," and then realizing that you're not.
I didn't think it was me.
One of my biggest revelations in therapy was that, and I think with the paracosm thing I explained to you about, I think through life you end up adjusting yourself very subtly sometimes to fit things. Like for example, at school, if you got a little bit bullied or things like that, which I did a little bit, and I think I then. I don't know, say for example, this wasn't necessarily my example, but say someone's like, "You're too loud," you would then be quieter to fit in, but you're not being your true self then. But you're just trying to find a way to fit in.
I call it a chameleon. But when you
I've always felt like I'm good at being a chameleon, but actually what I've realised is that then if I achieve something in my chameleon state, I'm like, well, that's not the real me, so therefore I don't get the validation from it, because do you know what I mean? It's not authentic.
Yeah.
So even though I achieve these things professionally, first of all, I was doing loads of drugs, so that fucked my self-worth up. But also I was like, but I'm not being my true self. So therefore, and also, I've left something on the table because I'm always tired and asleep and high. I might have done this, but I should be doing this kind of thing. It was like, it was always them constant battles. So from the outside looking in, my friends were like, "Wow, you've done this and this and this." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm capable of more." Kind of thing. That was always my battle.
Same.
And I guess that was kind of my big revelation with therapy, is realising that I need to stop with that pressure and that stuff, because it just means that I never really like myself. I'm in a constant state of kind of self-loathing a little bit.
Yeah, I think that is exacerbated with drugs and alcohol, because they provide something in the beginning, but then
when it gets bad, it's then also what you're worthy of, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think like when you're using it in an abusive way, it's then like, well, that's what you're worthy of.
Exactly.
That's the self-harm thing.
Before I hit the rock bottom, like there was definitely the last year and a half of my using where I went through, which I think is a very dangerous stage of accepting that I'm just a drug addict and being okay with it. Oh, fuck it.
It's like you almost stop trying to resist.
Yeah, exactly that. So like, obviously trying to fight with it, trying to be abstinent for 2 weeks, then having a fucking 4-day bender, and then getting to the stage of just like, oh, fuck it, this is who I am. This is what I've come down to. This is what I am. Everyone thinks that I am. Got a reputation for it, so I'll just be it.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous place to get to.
Yeah.
And then...
So then, came out of rehab. A shift had happened in my brain where I was like, I actually don't want to use. Before, it always felt like I was resisting because I knew it made me unhappy, but I didn't quite have the want to stop, I don't think, really. I think it would get bad and I'd be like, I need to stop.
Was it this? Because this was me, right? I need to stop, but I never, ever, ever considered stopping forever. Not because forever feels like too much, but like, for me, it was like, I just need to take a break.
For me, no, I don't think it was. I think when I tried to quit, I don't think in my heart of hearts I thought I was quitting forever. But when I initially did, I was like, I am. But it feels so feeble when I think back to it now. I know. Like, I was just in denial, basically.
Yeah. Were you scared about leaving rehab?
No, I was getting cabin fever by the end. I really want to go home. I was like, yeah. The one thing I was sad about was leaving my therapist, because we still talk actually a lot now. She's just had a baby, and what I almost look back on it like some summer camp thing. I've got like this nostalgia towards it, because I had amazing times there. Like it was just, I'm so grateful that it happened, because I just had these revelations in my life that I don't know if I would have ever been able to have without having gone there. And you just, the space you have to work on yourself, because it's all you're doing for 6 weeks. You can't look at a phone, you can't do nothing else other than work on yourself. I started writing creatively again. I started doing all these things that I'd kind of lost touch with.
Amazing when we remove the outside of societal.
I just felt myself again.
Yeah.
Just for the first time with like so long, like, and I suddenly was like, these are the things that make me happy. And I think it's, with all the noise around you in real life, you lose sight of that. And I really felt like I connected to myself again.
Much distraction.
I was like crying all the time, laughing all the time, but like
I always say
I loved it. Like, I loved it.
People always say, like, oh, the worst thing about getting sober is you get all your feelings back, and the best
I
thing
was
is
so
you get...
grateful for that.
Yeah, but like you don't get to have those fucking belly laughs, which I can guarantee you probably haven't had in 10 years, without having some like hyperventilating crying. Like that's just how it's gonna go.
I was like,
but weigh it up, because when you do drugs, you don't get either.
But do you know what? I quite like crying sometimes.
I think so cathartic.
Like,
last night, right? I haven't cried in fucking ages. I do gratitude at the end of every day. I'm having this weird thing at the moment, okay? I don't know what's going on. I've got to take it to therapy next week. It's fucking bizarre, but I keep thinking about my mum dying. I don't know where that's coming from. It's really, like, it's tricky. And I'm lying in bed, howling. The dog's at the end of the bed. But at the same time... No, it's funny, because at the same time, I'm like, I needed this. Whether it's because of just that, maybe not. Maybe I'm overwhelmed. There's lots of change. But I actually just lay there and was like, you know what, this is nice. And actually to be able to
I feel a bit like something gets lifted, doesn't it, when you cry?
Yeah.
But a lot of the time now, I'll just cry with happiness. I know that sounds stupid, but like relief.
That. Yeah.
It's a feeling of relief.
Yeah.
Because I can't speak enough on how heavy my addiction was on me. Like, it just felt like I was in this black hole and I couldn't see anything. No matter having a job or whatever. It's like everything on paper is good and nothing's good. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and it's
because you're lying to yourself.
To then get out of that and suddenly be like, oh, do you know what? Even just the smell of the sea is beautiful. Like, it sounds so corny, but like,
no, it's not though, and we've got to stop that, because like,
but it's
people
like,
who are still in addiction, they keep asking us like, what do you do when it's not boring? It's like, you don't understand. The fact that I'm not in addiction is so fucking beautiful.
It's just like being able to breathe again.
You
like
see
being
the world.
Everything's like, it's like almost like the brightness has been turned down and suddenly it's turned back up and everything's in HD.
And I get literally,
you can touch it.
Yeah, and you get like I get dopamine hit from like sitting. I'll be I'll be with my mum and dad, but I'll be watching them having a conversation, right? And I'm just, they don't notice that it's happening, but I'm watching them talk and laugh, and I'm looking at them like, taking that in.
My mum actually said to me, not long after I got out of rehab, she was like, my mum's very like, what do you call it, like touchy-feely or whatever.
Tactile.
Like, tactile, that's the word. She said that for the first time in 4 or 5 years, she touched me and I didn't batter off me. She was like, and I looked at her and she said I had light in my eyes again. Like stuff like that, where it's like, just feeling like I want to be with people, and I want to, like, it was so isolating, and even when I was with people, I wasn't really with people because I was like
vacant,
or having this inner battle. So to then have that peace, it's just like amazing. But the thing for me is I went out of rehab and then I went to Cornwall and was doing all these different things, and I was kind of riding this crest of a wave and just buzzing, and also was not getting anything like cravings, and I was like,
I think it's important to say you were
I was drinking alcohol, yeah, but not getting drunk.
But the reason why, I know, but the reason why you don't have that is because your end of your using didn't revolve around alcohol.
What I struggled with a bit with my channel is that when I then started talking about
dry sniffing.
Well, no, more talking about the fact I was still drinking is obviously that's very triggering for a lot of people who are in recovery.
Everyone has to understand that everyone's different.
I found difficult is people were then like, I'd announce like 100 days clean, and I'm like, well, it's not though, is it? Because you drink alcohol.
Well, I've had the same thing with ADHD medication. People being like, well, you're not clean and sober because you take amphetamine.
But do you know what? And there's no blame on my relapse on anyone, but I started to be like, my recovery isn't authentic. I started to have all these sorts of thoughts, and then I started to really struggle with it. But then, I'd say maybe like,
I remember the day.
I think it was 110 days in.
So what happened?
Do you remember there was the Euros happening, and I actually did a video with my football shirt on.
Yeah.
Doing my bit for England. And I was going... at that point, I hadn't been to meetings for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, and I was kind of just like getting back into like socialising again, going to pubs and maybe drinking 4 or 5 pints, and just like, I guess just like having a good time, like partying, but...
And thinking, oh my God, I cracked the code. Like,
yeah, but not getting cravings. And then, I'll just tell the real version. So basically, me and Amy had a massive argument.
Tell the real version.
About, I was going to just miss out the argument part, but I'll tell it because it's relevant to where my headspace was.
Rigorous honesty, this
We've
podcast.
been out for dinner, and there was no alcohol involved or anything like that, but I can't remember what the argument was about. It was about something to do with me. I don't know, I hadn't done something and she got annoyed at me, and I was like, for fuck's sake, I'm in recovery, just let me be in recovery and stop expecting anything else of me, like this sort of conversation.
Yeah.
And I was and I found that sometimes I can be a bit like that, where I'm a bit like, look, I just recovery's first, and like, yeah, no, get you the attention, but I think I'm in recovery, so there you go. Which is, not ideal. But anyway, that happened. She went home. She was going to stay at mine. We had an argument. She was like, you know what, I'm going home. When she went home, I was like, I'm going to call it in. Fuck it. Just kind of was angry, and then was like, but was still like, I'm going to just do a bag and keep it a secret. Ended up reloading like 3 times, going all the way through to the next day. And I just texted Amy and told her straight away.
Yeah.
And then the come down was like, there was a whole new level. I didn't know you could get to a come down. So I was like, I went in the bath and just like sobbed out loud in the bath, like just like really tragic, sitting in like no bubbles or nothing, and just like
no dance,
no radux. It's like, oh, and just feeling like, fuck, I fucked it. All this like 110 days, all the therapy, all the work, all the progress is gone because of this one slip, and I just could not. Like I was, this is dark, but I was like, I'm gonna kill myself.
It's honest because I
talking about thinking of ways that I could do it. I was like looking at fixtures in my flat, being like, I can hang a belt there. Like I was lower than low, and like the TikTok things added to a whole other level of shame because I'm like, I've now got this channel where people rely on me, and I've got to turn up for them, and I've let them down, as well as my family, as well as Amy, as well as everyone that is looking to me as this like beacon of hope in recovery, and I failed. And not just the relapse, that all that stuff just weighed so heavy on me, and I was so ashamed. And it's worth also saying that it wasn't that I then just got back. It was then like a week or two where I was like, I think I've used maybe 4 or 5, had like 4 or 5 sessions.
Yeah, because this is interesting because you did the initial one, sat in the bath, had that moment, but then that wasn't the end of it, was it?
No, it was like a couple of weeks where I was off the wagon, basically.
Yeah. Did Amy know about that? Did she just leave you to it?
Amy knew about it. I communicated it with my family, which I don't know why. I guess I couldn't really hide it. Like Amy's there. We're together all the time, so it's like if I'm suddenly gone for 2 days, then she's going to know. She knows the signs.
I just find it interesting that feeling that awful again.
But the problem was, once I'd done the initial one and felt that awful, I was then like, whoa, I've fucked it now anyway.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm getting to. So basically you were like, well, I'm straight back to square one, so I may as well carry on where I left off.
Yeah, after the first one, I think there was maybe like 4 days where I then was like, went to a meeting, like kind of tried to get, but I just...
You couldn't get out of your own head.
What was... I actually got worse after, but the 4th day was probably the worst I'd felt because it was almost like it was sinking in what I'd done, and I kept just thinking, oh, I spent all that money on rehab, I did all these things, and it's all just been wasted. I couldn't forgive myself. I was so upset and so angry at myself. And then I just went back into pretty much very quickly exactly what it was before I went to rehab. And then I can't really say that there was a particular thing that then got me back out of it. I think I just had it was just darker and shitter than ever before. And I was just like, and Amy was like, if you're carrying on, we're done, basically. She's like, I'm not being with an addict. I had my mum on the phone to me crying, my loved ones really worried about me, my dad frantically texting me, stuff like that. All thinking that I was going to like kill myself. So it was really, really bleak. But I kind of managed to get out the other side. And it was just very gradual, like... I then was like, right, let's just... another thing was I was like, I'm just going to stay at my dad's and with Amy. I'm not going to be alone, which I'm still doing now, really. I'm not really allowing myself to be in the flat by myself, like overnight. And I often think back and I just think I just got a bit complacent, I think.
Did you just sort of start going back to meetings? Did you...
Started going back to meetings. Also, when I left rehab, they give you like an exit plan, which is basically just like a structure. So you kind of build it yourself with your therapist, but it's like, I get up at this time, I go to this many meetings, you just put in like I think one of the most common things, and I really agree with it, is finding structure in sobriety, finding a routine and falling out of that. Because as soon as you fall, and I had fallen out of it because I was drinking more, going to pubs, getting up later. Like part of my routine was to get up at like 7 and go walk early on the beach and do meditation on the beach and all this kind of stuff, and I'd stop doing all that. I wasn't meditating, I wasn't journaling, I wasn't going to meetings. Yeah. It's really easy to do, like really easy to just think, do you know what, I don't need that routine, it's fine, I've got this.
Yeah.
But actually that routine is probably doing more than you realise in terms of keeping your head in the right place.
As much as it's staying clean and sober, it's also just retraining your brain when you want to do something else, but you force yourself to do the other thing.
Yeah, and I think your brain is always going to naturally be like, it's fine. But I think
this is what I find so fascinating about the human brain, right? It's like, for example, we know the things that make us feel better. So like, not just in recovery, right? But like, I know that if I walk the dog, like whether it's raining or sunny or whatever, I just know. Like sometimes I really can't be asked, but I don't understand that pathway of my brain where if I go and do that, I feel great, but yet still, my brain will tell me, can't be bothered and I'd rather have another hour in bed, even though that's going to make me feel so much shitter.
I've done a load of work around stuff like that, like thoughts versus feelings, and there's that whole thing, I think, where if you're not feeling that well, your brain makes you want to do the things that make you feel worse. So it's really important that when you're not feeling that good or that active, or you're feeling lethargic but you don't want to set dog out, try and put your brain into the version of like, what do I do when I'm happy? Because if I've got that problem where if I'm having a down time, like I'm not feeling great, and I then just sit indoors or eat shit food or don't exercise, then what could have been a down day becomes a down week. Whereas if on that down day you say, do you know what, I'm going to force myself to go for a run, I'm going to force myself to go for a swim, I'm going to force myself to go out for a walk, I'm not going to order fast food, I'm going to eat healthy food, then that down day, it stays as one day. And you can have it the other day. And that's the battle I find with recovery, is like keeping yourself motivated on that path, because as soon as you deviate and don't do the things you've set out for yourself, like my routine does include exercise and being active and blah, blah, blah. And as soon as I don't have them days, then the down day becomes a down 3 days. Then the down 3 days becomes I want to use because I'm feeling shit. And it's like, it's just really trying to keep. And also, there's never been one time where you go for the dog walk or you do the exercise and you don't feel the benefit from it afterwards.
But that's what I mean.
But your brain can't see that sometimes. Yeah. But it's why you just have to make it non-negotiable.
But I find it much easier now to not have that black and white thinking. But I struggle to then rest when I know I need to rest, or like, because now having a bit more of a purpose and stuff, it's this whole, with ADHD and burnout and things like that, it's like I'm addicted to not wanting to do that, because if I rest, it reminds me of when I was when come downs. Like if I want to sit on the sofa, for example, over a weekend and I'm trying to just chill, like I want to do it, but I have to make sure that I've had a shower, that I've got like clean slouches on.
I think for me, it's like, and I'd say it to anyone that's in recovery, like keep reminding yourself that you're not using. And actually, do you know what? If you have that day where maybe you do miss a run or you miss one little bit, don't just be like, oh fuck it then. Yeah. Just do it again the next day. Because I think that's my problem, is I start to let it slip, and then I just like, oh well, it slips now.
So where are you at now?
So I was 3.5 months, then a relapse. So yeah, probably 3 months.
3 months, yeah. And what are you doing now then to stay?
I'm doing
no drinking, obviously.
No drinking.
How have you found that? Quite easy.
I'll be really honest with you. Yeah. I resent it.
You resent not being able to?
Because I just think,
yeah,
I don't know if it's really serving me. Like, as in, like, and I'm conscious of saying this, it's my
This is your story. This is your story.
As I've always said, and my stance on the drinking hasn't really changed, but I was just like, do you know what, I just need to try something. Because the way I saw it was like, maybe it's keeping some door open in some way, so maybe I just need to close it, and maybe I can revisit that. And a bit like what you said on a video the other day, where it's like, I can't think about it forever, I just have to think about it now, today.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm approaching everything I'm doing. I'm about to start with a new therapist. I've been meetings, I do the Monday meeting, that's probably it, 1 meeting a week. But the main thing for me is I now have a routine where I stay at my dad's 4 days a week, stay with Amy 3 days a week. Right now I just kind of feel a bit more like calm in myself, whereas I feel when I reflect on that time leading up to my relapse, it was all this new exciting thing. Whereas now that's gone, I'm kind of just a bit more at ease with myself, and I can kind of see myself in what my future looks like now. Whereas before I just had this, and until recently I had this feeling of like, I don't know what's in store for me. Like I can't get back to music. Like I've got like.
So have you made that decision now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made that a while ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I miss it a lot. A lot. I
always say this though, like it's not like I always say this like.
I don't necessarily know if it's even that I miss music. It's that I miss that buzz of achieving something.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get back to. And I talk a lot on my channel. People are like, no, you need to be clean for this long before you. And I'm like, no. I need a purpose. I'm just
Absolutely.
wired that way. For me right now, my kind of plan is that I want to create like an online community where there's like sharing stuff, and I just really buzz off that so much.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
it.
You
I
found a
love
purpose.
it, and I just feel like I've got this whole new, and I think you have as well, perspective on life and the patterns of behaviour that everyone is in.
I just feel like there's another way to live your life.
Yeah, and I think
you don't have to do what everyone else is doing.
And I think people don't, like you said, there's nowhere to look for that.
Yeah, it's so hard.
And I think
when you know that you're not, I knew for so many years that like I wasn't being me, and I wasn't happy. But then there was no one else to do it with, and I didn't want to do it on my own. But I had to do it on my own. I was so convinced that there were so many people like me.
But that's why I love the idea of like creating some sort of community. And I'm not talking about. It doesn't. I haven't really worked it out yet, but it doesn't have to necessarily be people in recovery. But it can just be that people are looking for a better life or looking for a better way of living.
That's what I think too.
And I think
like we've been conditioned
doing things in real life together, like actually in person. Like you know what I mean? It's like which probably seems mental to some people, but like that's what fills me up. That's what makes me happy.
Because we've been so lacking of it, and also because we've had COVID, and people forget that it's so easy. We forget that we had these big fucking 4 years, but like it was just weird, and like
I think that's had a long-lasting effect. It probably is hard to measure, but it's big. But most people are in the trap, aren't they? And not to get too deep, but like I also think that most people drink loads of alcohol. And that kind of keeps them in line because they're just like they're a bit numb and a bit hungover and a bit whatever. So I've got this new bubbling along in my life.
I'll never preach about it online, but I've got this whole new thing with alcohol. My whole new where I've got to after 6 months, which is that it is literally that they had to pick one thing that like we could let them have and get away with. Otherwise, we're just going to be a complete turmoil.
Well, it's going to be the one that dumbs you down, isn't it?
So it's going to be the one that
not the like
you're allowed to do.
That opens your brain.
Yeah, but it's like it makes us loads of money. It dulls them down so they don't progress and they don't realise their full potential. And
keeps them in line.
Keeps them in line. And it keeps them in this structure of working, partying, weekend, week.
Because I don't know about you now, but I cannot think of anything worse than going back to like Monday to Friday working and then being like, my outlet is Saturday night.
Never.
Like, it's when you actually think about it.
But I don't have weekends now, right? I just have days.
Yeah, I'd be happy if I made half the money I used to make as long as I've got a balance.
Yeah.
It's for me, I've realised that actually I don't need to make all that money. It doesn't really mean anything because actually half that money and time and balance in my life is so invaluable, and I just think a lot of people have lost sight of that.
Yeah, and also time is the most expensive thing to have. It's the most expensive
I don't want to get to like Gabor Mate, you like as well, right?
Obsessed, yeah.
When they said about what would be your biggest regret in life, and he was like working too hard.
Yeah.
He's like, I worked too hard.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't. It's like I missed so much time from working and convincing myself that I needed to be this status professionally.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's like it doesn't matter.
No.
When you die, no one's going to be like, "Oh, you worked really hard."
No one's going to put it on your gravestone now.
Really hard working.
Yeah, really hard working. Didn't we know him?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not even just work. It's just being disconnected to life and yourself.
And it's also that you're pouring all your energy into your work and you're giving your best version of yourself to work. So then your loved ones see the secondary version.
Yeah, but this whole concept of like you get 2 days to yourself to work on you, and then you must be at the
5 days
confines of someone else, filling someone else's pockets.
Yeah.
And I just think that, people don't. We're just changing, aren't we? We're always changing. We're projects. We're and it's okay to change. But I think we get scared to do that, And people sometimes, I'm sure, will be listening to this. It's easy to say that because you both do social media now, but that's just the path that our lives have gone on to. We're not earning money. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't earn any money at the moment. My life has fallen into, I've gone into recovery and gone home, and now I look after someone's house and they pay me 120 quid a week, and that is my income. I don't have money.
I don't have any money now.
But I have no assets. Yeah, so it's because of the realisation that I would rather, even after this stint, move back home and figure how to live a life of happiness and peace than whatever.
I must say, I don't know about you, this whole one thing I can definitely be grateful for through recovery is that chance to kind of strip it all away and look at it.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you get a different perspective on what's important, and I don't know if I would have got that without this journey.
I would say that if you have the opportunity, and I would advise this, if you have the opportunity to, some people's work are really understanding. So if you feel like you would have that to tell work and ask for some time off, the thing is I really do believe in this, is that sobriety it's not about alcohol. It's not about giving up alcohol and drugs. It's about going on a self-discovery journey. So when people say to me, what do you do at the weekends and you're not bored? I'm like, yeah, no, but because I go to a meeting every night, early recovery, you have to learn what you need, learn what excites you, learn these things. It's not about just
I think as well, the problem is if you're in that cycle of partying, you never have the time to learn because you're either partying or being hungover or working.
Yeah.
Whereas, and like I said in rehab, so when I was really young, I wanted to be a writer when I was really young, and I used to write these really long stories and then leave them for my mum and stuff like that to read. And I was really into it. I was convinced I was going to be a novelist. I was going to go into do English language at Durham. Ended up, obviously, like we spoke on this pod, going into working in the city and never pursued that. When I went to rehab, all of a sudden I was like, I've got this free time, what should I do? So I started writing this series of stories called Memories of the Future. First of all, I feel like I'm good at writing. Why did I never do this? Like, it's just a natural thing for me. But I now really love getting back into creative writing again. And I think if I hadn't had the space to stop and be like, do you know what, I really like doing this, I wouldn't have ever picked a pen back up and done it.
You know what I find so funny about that is that you actually have always known it.
Yeah.
You have always known it. You actually probably know your purpose.
When like with you, the podcast, it's really interesting, yeah. Once you get to that place, no one anything really says matters. When you're
okay with you,
then nothing matters.
No.
Nothing matters, and it's such a nice place to be.
And the majority of actually not even the majority. When you're okay with being you, the people that are important to you in your life, they'll be okay with you too. Anything else on the outside world and the outside thing, it's irrelevant.
All that chatter in your head suddenly becomes a bit less important, doesn't it? Like the self-doubt and stuff like that.
Not having a constant jargon of self-hatred for me has been like the most transcending thing.
That's the bit that I...
To not wake up and hate myself and think about every single thing that's wrong in my life, sit in victimhood, batter myself down, talk about, weight, relationship, life, being proud of myself, business, all of it, just a slew of negative jargon, 24 hours of the day. Yeah, like all the time. To then having a quiet, my brain is never quiet, but it not being...
Not negative.
Now it's all focused on ideas and excitement and all these things I could go into.
Like pushing forward stuff rather than wallowing in like past or worrying about your present situation. But if you just take that step, if you go to that first meeting, if you be honest with that person that's close to you, I think every single person will be really surprised how quickly things start to change inside themselves. Just saying no for resisting.
Exactly.
You need something to fundamentally shift. And I actually think just speaking out loud, whether that's in a meeting or whether that's a loved one, it's the start of that shift.
So
I definitely think that.
Yeah. Have we covered everything?
I think we've covered my whole life.
Thank you for being a Class A person.
Thank you for having me.
You're very
welcome. I loved it. It was really, really fun.
Good. Well done.
Thanks.